Hello and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live-streamed discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. I am me, and this is my co-host.
Oh, you know what? You know what happened there, Matt? Is
I do.
I didn't update the intro to the script. That's the
That's
thing.
okay,
That's the
Scott.
thing we forgot to do in our last minute prep.
We'll fix it later.
We'll fix it in post. This is actually kind of fitting for this book because it's like a disaster of an. Wait, how can I say that without being mean? I don't mean to be mean to the book. I mean that everyone's kind of fucked up and terrible, and
Yeah,
that's us.
this
That's
is
us.
appropriate.
Yeah, there we go.
We
How's
need
it
we'll,
going, everyone?
we'll need to go back and edit our brain
Just
to
pretend that
change. Yeah, we
this
don't need
is
to change the past this time.
this
Right?
isn't how it happened, right?
This isn't how it happened.
This isn't how it happened. That's Matt. I'm Scott. Hello. This is our monthly book club. I hope you're all having a wonderful Friday evening. If you are joining us for the very first time, hello. We are Matt and Scott. I said that already. You'll have to guess who is which because I don't remember. And we are Doof Media, and we make podcasts all about the stories we love. We also arrange and organize this here monthly digital book club because who wants to go to another place to talk about books? No one wants to do that, especially in 2022. So we do it here on the internet. Matt, what is this thing?
My name's Ortus, not Matt. I don't know who you're talking to.
I'm sorry.
So yeah, each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all the supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia and let them vote on which they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it.
That is correct. Then we meet here on the last Friday of the month and spend a couple of hours discussing the book. We pull some slides of some interesting or important moments from the book, and we just chat. We just chat about the story for a few hours, have some fun. And that's what we're doing tonight. Matt, what book are we talking about this month?
This month we're talking about Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir.
All right. What is this about?
Well, basically, Harrow Harknonagesimus, last necromancer of the Ninth House, has been drafted by her emperor to fight in an unwinnable war. Side by side with a detested rival, Harrow must perfect her skills and become an angel of death. But her health is failing, her sword makes her nauseous, and even her mind is threatening to betray her. Sealed in the gothic gloom of the Emperor's Mithraeum, with 3 unfriendly teachers, hunted by the mad ghost of a murdered planet, Harrow must confront 2 unwelcome questions. Is somebody trying to kill her? And if they succeed, would the universe be better off?
Oh boy, that's very dramatic. So yeah, we're covering the second book in the Locked Tomb, not trilogy, quadrilogy. I think there are 4 announced books in the series. One that is coming out this year, actually.
At least.
Yeah. We forgot to say hi to everyone. We were so flustered at the beginning of the show. So hey, folks! I see Kyle. I see Kyrgyzstan. I see Not. I see John. I see Quantum. I see Doom, and I see Dan. Dan. I combined your last name with your first name and called you Tan. So you're Tan now, Dan. So that's just who you are. I hope that's okay. A lot of familiar faces. Good to see you all. Very excited to talk about this book. Before we get into the book, though, we did. There's bipolar on as well. How you doing? Before we do that, though, we did have a change. We mentioned on the show last month that we are going to run a second poll for next month's book club for the people that actually attend the live stream. So if you are a patron and you attend the live stream, you effectively get to vote twice. And what we're going to do is we're going to kick that poll off at the beginning of the show and leave that running throughout the course of the show. So if anyone is late, they can also get a hold of it. So that's what's going to happen right now. And just before we send you guys the link to the show, we just wanted to show you the current stats. This is where our book club sits for March. Next month. So Flowers for Algernon, if we did not have this part, would win it, and that's what we'd be doing. But there's still a chance for you guys to change it all around if you want. So let me get that link for you. There it is. I'm going to drop it right here into chat. And so what I've done on this poll, actually, because Straw Poll has so many more options than Patreon does, Matt. So, I wish Patreon had as many options as this thing had. It allows you to pick 2. It allows you to pick 2 books. You don't have to pick 2, but you can pick 2 choices. So you can't vote for all of them. but we're not going to limit you to just one. So vote for the two that you would be most interested in covering, and we will add the results of the straw poll that's running over the course of the book club to the results we already have here, and that is how we will pick what is next month's book going to be.
Excellent. I can already see a lot of campaigning happening in the chat,
Yeah.
which is fine for the next 60 seconds, and then we're going to focus down and get on topic.
That is correct. So if folks, if y'all could do me a favor, if you see anyone come to the chat late or say, hey, if you could grab that link and drop it for them as well as the chat scrolls up and they lose it, that would be great. I thought about putting the link like at the bottom of the page. For those listening to the audio only version, Matt has just put sunglasses on. It's nighttime, Matt.
It's a reference, Scott.
Yes. I mean, yes. You can vote for both, Doom. You can vote for both. We've set it up that way. You should be able to vote for two. So yeah, enjoy the poll. We will check the results at the end of the show, but let's get right on with it and go to the man in the glasses. Matt, what did you think of Harrow the Ninth? And of course, as Matt is answering this question, I want you all to let us know what you thought of this book. Had you read it before? Did you read it again for? I know it just came out not too long ago, but did you read it again for the book club? And what did you think of it?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it in a lot of the same ways that I enjoyed Gideon the Ninth. In usual form, I have to get my negativity out of the way quickly by just saying I did not enjoy it as much as I enjoyed Gideon the Ninth. The Gideon the Ninth had the advantage of fitting nicely within sort of an existing story structure. It is a murder mystery in a big house. That is the genre, and there's a lot of other stuff happening, but fundamentally the plot and all of the complexity of it fits within certain genre conventions. This story has the handicap, you could say, the issue of not fitting very nicely within any genre, or maybe you could even say dabbling in so many genres that I don't really know where I am. And the result was that I found myself to be very confused and unsure about what was happening in a way that was a bit frustrating. That said, I think I did figure it all out in a pretty timely fashion. I also didn't like Harrow as much as I liked Gideon as a protagonist, so that's the other nitpick. Those things aside, I found it an enjoyable read. It's very well written on a prose level.
Yes.
I really enjoy a lot of the dialogue, like any scene with multiple characters where they're talking and having a debate, having a conversation, having an argument. There's great, just the really snappy dialogue. I really think Mira has a talent for that, specific like strength of hers. And I'm actually still excited to read the next book, although I find myself just kind of hoping that it's more like fun and wacky like Gideon the Ninth was.
Yeah. I agree with a lot of what you said there, and I'm looking through chat, and everyone is remarkably positive about this book, and that makes me very happy because it is a very good novel. I think Tamsin Muir is a very, very talented author, and I'm with her on whatever she does. I'm with this series, and I'm with whatever she does after this series. Like it's just what's going to happen. I will say I'm conflicted on this book in a lot of ways. I think that the best way to sum up the way I feel is this was a great book to have read. There were many times that I wouldn't say I was necessarily enjoying reading it. And I think it's because for the reasons you talked about. It's, by design, very confusing. It is by design not that quote-unquote fun in a lot of places. Harrow is a very harrowing character, right? By design. And, so for our listeners that will understand this reference, there were moments in this where it reminded me of, the differences between Worm and Ward, the differences between Gideon and Harrow, in that this is a book that was designed from the ground up to be different, to be of a completely different tone, and to be exploring something different than the first one. And so like, I think she absolutely accomplishes everything she set out to do here, but by design, it almost makes it less, quote unquote fun, whatever that means.
Yeah. Right. In the same way that people ragged on Ward for not being what worm was. It's
Yeah,
like, oh,
yeah,
it wasn't supposed to be. But when you kind of were getting into it expecting that, then
yeah.
you're going to feel a little caught off guard.
Yeah, and I think, I loved Ward. And I think one of the reasons I loved Ward, on top of it being a very good book, was just we were doing a deep dive week by week in-depth show on it, and like the thing that I wanted most out of Ward on a week to week basis is give me enough so I have things to talk about on the show, right? Like that's the thing I wanted the most out of that book as I was reading it, because I had to do a 2-hour show every week and I needed things to talk about. And Ward always delivered on that, right? Like it always delivered. It always had things for me to talk about. And I'm not saying that Harrow doesn't, but I was reading this book like a normal person. And so like the parts of Ward where people talked about how, oh, it's just too dour, too depressing, like it's designed unfun. I didn't care when I was reading that book because I was reading it in a way different way. This book, I wasn't reading it that way. And so the parts of it that like I recognized the complaints in Ward that I was feeling got to me a little bit here. But all that being said, I think this is a remarkable book. I really do. I think this is, it's not fun in the traditional kind of ways. And I think the thing that makes it most clear how unfun it is the incredible tonal shift when Gideon like tears her way back into the story. Like it's just like the the whole book shifts at that point, and like it makes the comparison even more stark. But the writing is top notch. The characters are wonderful. And yeah, it's confusing. It's very, very, very confusing. I'm still not sure I understand everything that happens at the end of the book. But yeah, what a fun concept and what a fun world.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I sort of thought of Gideon the Ninth as almost like a Terry Pratchett-esque like comedy book, and this is not a comedy book. Until Gideon busts back into it.
No,
kind of
I mean, and that's not entirely true because there are moments of comedy even with Harrow. Like most of the comedy is playing off of how unfunny Harrow is and the people around her. But I mean, there are, like, to be fair to the book, there are definitely moments of fun in this book that aren't directly related to Gideon. But yeah, I mean, she's a character that's going through a lot of shit.
Yeah.
And of course the book has to reflect that, and I totally respect the author for doing that. It would be very easy to make another book that was exactly like the first book, right? Like the first book was very popular. Gideon was a very popular. I say very popular. I don't have numbers. It was a popular book, right? It was popular enough that the publisher said yes, more. And she could have done the same thing, and she didn't. She set out in many different ways to do stuff very, very different.
Yeah, and I really admire that. There's going to be a ton to talk about. Like I know that already. It's just like you say, there's a certain level of confusion to reading it that at times was a bit overwhelming. But most, like a lot of the time, the confusion was that kind of pleasant confusion of like, what's going on? Can I figure this out? So people in the chat are, like you said, overwhelmingly positive. A lot of people are commenting to the effect that, man, it's just so fun to have a puzzle basically in book form that you can think through. People appreciate it for being weird. There's been a lot of commentary I've seen here and elsewhere about the idea that Mirror is sort of playing in this space of tropes of like online fan fiction basically, which it's funny because I've definitely dipped my toes into that space. I've read a few of the works people describe, not a lot of them. And the thing is, I sort of see that as it's all continuous with the space of just like referential fiction, which is, also what the Dark Tower does. So it's not like we're new to this.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always fun, especially when you're like a seasoned reader, if you know what I mean, to read stuff where it's just like overflowing with referentiality and tropes, and you're like, I recognize that, you kind of feel at home. I think that's part of the appeal of this.
And I'm not even gonna like make the claim that I picked up 10% of all the references being flung at you. I mean, I definitely did get some of them, and there were always fun stuff when they're literary references, they're Catholicism references, they're you're right, internet culture mimetic references, like they're just throwing everything at you, and it is fun when you catch up on that stuff. I think someone during the chat across the month linked like someone who had tried to compile every single reference that this book makes, and This it's a lot. It's a lot. And that's part of the fun of it for sure.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's specific ones that I hope we get to at some point in this conversation.
And I will say one of the things that I admire Tamsin so much about here is that like there's also this thing where Gideon the book, not the character, but also the character, but Gideon the book had this very specific type of language to it. You know, it was, I think when we talked about the book, I described it as literally like YouTuber speak, you know, like it very, very specific. And this book does not talk the same. And I like, so you can tell that the author went out of her way to change up her style a little bit. And some of that style leaks in, you know, through Gideon and through some of the other characters, but Harrow is not that person and she's not going to talk like that. And even though we're technically not in her head because half of this book is told in second person perspective, so we're technically not in Harrow's head. Like we're not like the narrative, the actual prose is not necessarily in Gideon's head either. So like we don't see that style come in there. And again, that's one of those things that I really respect her for, because she really wanted to do something different. And you could have just written the same book with the same exact style, and we didn't do that.
Yeah. And I actually don't think that would have worked very well.
No.
If we had been using Gideon's aphoristic style in the second person describing Harrow's actions, that would have been like a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think every character in this book is from a different subgenre.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the fun of watching them clash.
Yeah, definitely. So you want to go ahead and get into it?
Let's do it.
All
right. We begin as always with the opening of the book. Prologue. The night before the Emperor's murder. Your room had long ago plunged into near complete darkness, leaving no distraction from the great rocking thump, thump, thump of body after body flinging itself onto the great mass already coating the hull. There was nothing to see, the shutters were down, but you could feel the terrible vibration, hear the groan of chitin on metal, the cataclysmic rending of steel by fungus claw. It was very cold. A fine shimmer of frost now coated your cheeks, your hair, your eyelashes. In that smothering dark, your breath emerged as wisps of wet gray smoke. Sometimes you screamed a little, which no longer embarrassed you. You understood your body's reaction to the proximity. Screaming was the least of what might happen. God's voice came very calmly over the comm. 10 minutes until breach. We've got half an hour of aircon left. After that, you'll be working in the oven. Doors down until the pressure equalizes. Conserve your temp. Everyone, Harrow, I'm leaving yours closed as long as possible. You staggered to your feet, limpid skirts gathered in both hands, and picked your way over to the comm button, scanning for something damning and intellectual to say. You snapped, I can take care of myself. Harrowhark, we need you in the river, and while you are in the river, your necromancy will not work. I am a lictor, my lord, you heard yourself say. I am your saint. I am your fingers and gestures. If you wanted a hand who needed a door to hide behind, even now, then I have misjudged you. From his far-off sanctum deep within the Mithraeum, you heard him exhale. You imagined him sitting in his patchy, worn-out chair, all alone, worrying his right temple with the thumb he always worried his right temple with. After a brief pause, he said, Harrow, please don't be in such a hurry to die. Do not underestimate me, teacher, you said. I have always lived. See, you can't dislike that, right?
Yeah.
It's just delightfully written, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, great way to start the conversation. I agree with you. It's so I'm gonna contradict something I said earlier, but like post fact, it's really fun, right? Like as you're reading that, it's really fun. It has like I think there are moments in this book that really got me down with just with who Harrow is as a character, but like listening to you read that was very, very fun. And I think part of it is you kind of know you're in on the joke with the book now too, because you've read it. Like I think a second reread of this book will be very, very rewarding because you're in on a lot of the jokes now. And so you kind of understand. So you're not just completely out there confused, lost in the river. But I mean, like, there's so many statements this book is making right away. Like the first one, the prologue being titled "The Night Before the Emperor's Murder," is like, bam, statement, made it. The other one is, as people are talking about in chat, the second person perspective is told to us right away here at the beginning. That is a choice. That is a rare thing. I think I've only seen it a handful of times in all the books I've read throughout my life. And I've always kind of thought it didn't work very well in those books that I read. It became a gimmick that was a good idea, but really didn't extend to a full novel's worth of content in that particular choice. But I think it does here. I think part of the reason it does here, I think Doom said it in chat really good. It's a great way to convey that Harrow is kind of disassociating, and I love the other word choices, the way she does that as well. Like the idea of the book saying, you heard yourself say, right? Instead of like, you said, it's no, you heard yourself say, I can take care of myself, or I am Lictor, Lord, you heard yourself say. Like she's barely in the perspective. Like this, there's no way this book could be in first person perspective, right? It just couldn't, because Harrow is not aware enough to be narrating her own life to you.
Yeah, she's a very unusual character,
Mm-hmm.
and I do think that this is an amazing choice for doing that, because it's like, what is your other option? She sort of can't have a conventional first person narration. I mean, we sort of try to, when we're doing the part that happens in the river, the other thread of the story,
Mm-hmm.
and it's actually very different in many ways, to the extent that, well, okay, we'll talk about that when we get there, I guess.
Sure.
Um, yeah, I love everything you said about this. I mean, it's just funny. Like I just think, do not underestimate me, teacher. I have always lived. Um, Somehow that's like a perfect Harrow thing to say, where like it's funny, but you're not really sure if she knows she's being funny.
Uh-huh.
You suspect that she's not, but then again, maybe, you know. Um, there's another fun thing that starts here and kind of goes throughout the whole book, which I guess might as well, put a pin in it now, is the Emperor is just such a lovable chap. Like in the sense of how he's written, like he the way he's written, he's like this lovable, slightly befuddled professor character,
Yeah.
and eventually we realize he's like the worst guy in the
He's
universe.
literally the worst person in the universe. Yeah, I'm glad you finished that thought, because I was like, "Ooh, are we gonna have a disagreement?" No, no, but I
Yeah.
think you're absolutely right, and I think part of that is the natural discongruity between Harrow's seeing him as a god and everyone else around him seeing him as a dude,
Hmm.
just like as Doom is saying in chat, a dad. Like he's just kind
Hmm.
of the lovable dad of the group that just wants all the kids to get along, and also maybe killed the whole universe.
And not only that, but like the more you come to understand the dynamic of what's going on, it's like all of the lictors have always, for thousands of years, basically lived in this abusive relationship where they like,
Mm-hmm.
we have to do what he says or he'll kill us.
Mm-hmm.
But he pretends to be this nice guy, and they've just kind of settled into this detente where they're like,
Yeah.
all right, we have to like work in the shadows to try to figure out how we can kill him using these incredibly elaborate stratagems, and then act like we love him whenever we're around him, and act like we're all just buds. um
Yeah.
and
Yeah, like imagine going to your dad and your dad being like, "Well, kids, you can never leave me, and you always have to protect me, because if I die, so does the universe.
yeah,
So have a nice eternity."
yeah, right. I mean, it's fascinating how, to riff on what Doom is saying here in the chat, like he like awkwardly doesn't want you to bring up the fact that he's the most powerful being in the universe, or that he basically made everyone do this horrible ritual where they had to kill their best friends, and then their best friend lives inside them
Uh
forever.
huh.
Um, and yet, um, like it's inauthentic, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just his way of not having to address the fact that like they hate him. I guess I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
I think it's a way of him dealing with the guilt that I think he does legitimately have. Not that it's changing his behavior in any way, but I think he does legitimately have a lot of guilt over some of the decisions he's made. But I mean, the idea that he doesn't want people to call him God, but like, hey guy, if the whole of existence has this thing where they call you God, like that didn't come from nowhere, right? Like if you really didn't want people to worship you as a god, you could have nipped that in the bud. And really, the only ones he doesn't really want to see him that way are his lictors, because it feels like to him those are the only people that really matter.
Yeah.
Are his direct children, if you want to call them that.
I think they're just the people who he has in his orbit that get to be his playthings for thousands and thousands of years, whereas everyone else is just a blip.
Yeah.
Although he totally enjoys kind of the adoration and love of the blips, as well as we see with the crew of the warship at the beginning. John points out that it's not like the book is just cheekily referencing Christianity. It's actually that this guy consciously ripped off Christianity for all of his imagery and language and everything.
Yeah. I mean, it's really fascinating, and I think we're going to talk about this a lot throughout the thing because Christianity is so wound up in everything that's happening here. It's impossible not to. I mean, we touched on this in the first one. You know, the tomb with the rock being rolled like is literally inverse Christianity. And I think that the trend is continued here as well, because there's this idea that like in Christianity, the resurrection is like the big deal, right? Like Christ's resurrection is like the thing that saved us all. And I love the way in which this book, and I don't know for sure yet because I don't think the book comes right out and tells us that the way this guy got all his power was literally to kill the whole universe, and then he resurrected some of them.
That was my assumption. Yes.
Yeah, the book hasn't told us this, but it seems like that's where we're going with it. That like everyone's talking about, oh yes, the world ended, and then he resurrected people to we were dead, we were all dead, and then he resurrected us, hooray! But I mean, I think that's probably true, but I think we're missing the first part of that. But
yeah. Well,
that's just supposition. I don't actually know. That's just what I feel.
I think that, I mean, the main evidence for that is brief, a couple of lines when he's talking with the person who literally was around back then.
Yeah.
And their name is like a reference to a pop song in the modern era.
Wake me up inside.
Wake me up inside. Yeah. And they say something like, you know, you got the sense that they blew away. You know, he basically wiped out the whole species, if not all life in the universe, and then that gave him such a surge of power that he was able to, you know, become God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, part of the common theme or motif throughout this whole idea is that to resurrect something, like that, all this power comes at a price, right? Like Harrow exists off of the deaths of 200 children, right? All the lictors exist off of the death of one of their cavaliers, and so the emperor, his power, his great power, you know, presumably exists off of the death of a whole lot of people, right? And so I think that's a safe assumption to make. So anyway, to get back to my point, it is taking the concept of the resurrection, which was Christ's resurrection, was like the moment of, yay, we did it, I have unlocked eternal life for you, achievement unlocked, we've done it, hooray. And it's almost inverting that as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because now, you know, humanity is being hunted by these, you know, basically ghosts of planets forever. Actually, they're hunting him, I think, because he was the one who killed them in the first place. Like, that's just what makes sense. I think they have some bullshit explanation, but what makes sense to me is that he's the one who killed everything, and so the ghosts of all of the dead planets that he killed are chasing him.
I think the story he gives is that in order to resurrect everyone, it needed an immense amount of power, and I took that power from, you know, the planets. But yeah, also the people on them.
It doesn't make sense to me exactly like how planet is alive, but it doesn't matter. It's magic. I just have to what Quantum says here. Jod, which is the fandom name for John, who is God. Uh, Jod went to 3 masses, 2 40K tournaments, and the premiere of an Evangelion movie, and proceeded to base an empire on that. It's very good. It's very good, Quantum.
John brings up a good point that he probably only just killed everyone in the solar system. So actually, I mean, he's not a bad guy. I think we're going to continue this line of talk we're having throughout the entire rest of the show, but let's move on to the next slide and segue back to it naturally. That work for you?
Sounds good.
So we flash back, quote unquote, to before Harrow left for Canaan House, except we say here that her cavalier is somebody different. Our house has received good service from those who are fit but to hold their blade in scabbard, said Harrow Hark, keeping her voice even, which is not a line that scans, just so you know. Nobody will be surprised to find you a laggard. It's N a meter, a traditional form. Those who are fit but to hold the blade in the scabbard. That's not 9 feet of anything. Never to draw it forth for the battle. You will train with Captain Aglamine for the next 12 weeks, said Harrow Hark, rubbing her fingers back and forth, until the pad of her thumb felt very hot. You will meet the very minimum that is expected of a 9th House cavalry primary, which is now, fortunately, that you be as broad as you are tall, with arms that can carry the weight. But I need significantly more from you than the edge of the sword, Nijanad. The serving sister shadowed the edge of Harrow's peripheral vision. Ortus had raised his head and did not acknowledge the sister, which complicated things. He looked at Harrow with the faint kind of pity she always suspected he had held in her, the pity that marked him as an outsider in his own house, and would mark him as all the more an outsider in the house of his mother's line. She did not know what made Ortus Ortus. He was a mystery too boring to solve. What more is there? He asked, a little bitterly. Harrow Hark closed her eyes, which shut out Ortus's tremulous, worried face and the shadow of the body-faced serving girl that fell over the desk. The shadow told her nothing. Physical evidence was often a trap. She shut out the new and rusty rapier that now creaked in the scabbard at Ortus's hip. She shut out the comforting smell of dust made hot by the whirring heater in the corner of the room, mixing with just milled ink in her inkwell, tannic acids, human salts. This isn't how it happens, said the body, which gave Harrow a curious strength. I need you to hide my infirmity, said Harrow Hark. You see, I am insane. So lots to talk about here. I picked this slide both because it contained Ortus and it contained the body, which are like the two things that the book starts with.
Yes. Definitely very, very I mean, so at a certain point, I just decided that I was going to just kind of take things at face value and that it would sort itself out as it went.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, we're either in an alternate universe or a dream or something. And then gradually I came around to the idea of like, actually, okay, the theory I had in my head the longest was like, she erased Gideon from her memory,
Mm-hmm.
and her brain is continually trying to come up with a consistent narrative of what must have happened back on Earth.
Sure.
And it's like iterating and going through different passes, and that was pretty close to the truth. I didn't really understand about the river yet.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about the possibility that this was all basically happening in a sense, and these were ghosts. Maybe it occurred to me much later that they were ghosts. But I guess I got like pieces of it right, but certainly not all of it.
Yeah, as Kyrgyzstan is saying, the one thing that I did figure out almost right away is the Gideon Ortus name overwrite thing. When they introduce Ortus the Bold, aka Gideon the Bold, that's when I got like, oh, she did like a general name overwrite thing, and it's doing it here too. Because like it's so clever how she'll like end a chapter on, what did you call him? Or like, wait, what name? And then the chapter just ends, and like we never, and it's like, oh, so we're doing like a name thing. So I got that part pretty fast. And yeah, I think when we get, and I do have one of the letters in our slides, but when we get to the letters, when I realized that Harrow orchestrated some of this herself, or at least we're being told that, I kind of got the idea that, oh, she just carved this part of her out of herself, which would be a very Harrow thing to do. So I got that really quickly. Yeah. The stuff with the body, I wasn't and am still not. This is the thing about Harrow Hark, and it is a designed thing. One, people are fucking with her brain. She's being haunted, right? Two, she is maybe a little psychotic, like just on her own, just a little psychotic, and 3, other people are just literally gaslighting her, and so it's like you never know how many of these things are like
Right.
actually like it's it's brilliant, but it's also just really confusing.
Right, because there's the body, which is a hallucination, and then there's the body of the previous lictor that they killed that is also reanimated, and that was confusing because there's 2 dead bodies that are basically haunting her, um, and that only she is aware of.
Yeah.
And also, I just okay, so like you said, John God basically is like, there's no way that you made it into the locked tomb. And she, because she kind of worships him, she's just like, okay, I guess I must not have actually. And we kind of know that she did. Like, it would make very little sense if that were all wrong, right? But that's the thing, is it's like, I say right, and it's like, who knows? Like, who knows what actually happened?
Yeah.
Um,
You're right that the text is very kind of clear there that like no, Harrow, you could not have possibly gotten in, and it just reinforces Harrow's innate fear that she's insane, right? So like it seems too simple and neat that that's it, right?
but
But
but the body is haunting her, and you get
yeah,
the sense that the body is related to this, basically, God's cavalier, but not so strongly that I'm certain in that.
right.
I kind of just want people in the chat to tell me if we're even on the right track, because
Well, they don't know for sure either. I
well,
think
this is
they
the thing. I mean, that they probably don't, but it's also entirely possible that I just like missed or misunderstood major things. Like, that's kind of where I am with this book, unfortunately.
yeah.
There was also the kind of uphill battle of like, I totally forgot that, I like Gideon the Ninth a lot, but I had totally forgotten that Ortus Ninegad gets blown up in a shuttle explosion in that
Yeah.
book. So I was confused that he showed up here, but I didn't remember that he was literally dead. I thought he was just back on the ninth house.
Yeah, for a book that I read very closely and had an entire 2.5 hour conversation with you, the names just completely fell out of my brain, and so like, I mean, honestly, the first thing I did was like, was this like a Cavalier before Gideon? Did that happen? What? Okay, and so like, and then I think when we get to Canaan House with the changes there, I just flat out didn't remember the different characters' names, man. And so like the book kind of tries to catch you up on some of them, but like who was what and what did they mean and exactly how they died the first time around, like were things that I just didn't remember. And that, I mean, that's like, I'm not blaming the author for that, but that's like, that made it more difficult for me for sure.
Hmm. Yeah. Doom is pointing out that Ianthe never says Gideon, presumably having something to do with the fact that Harrow did something to her jaw. So.
Mm-hmm. So okay, so how this magic works, like when everyone's saying Gideon, she hears Ortus. So does that mean when she says Ortus, is she just saying Ortus?
I
Or
think
is
she's
she
saying
saying
Ortus.
Gideon?
My interpretation is she's saying Ortus, and everybody's just like, what the hell is wrong with her?
And they just roll with
And they just roll with it because at a certain, like, she keeps like passing out with blood coming out of her ears every time anybody says Gideon. I think at a certain point they just they're just like, necromancers, man. What are you gonna do? um,
That's very true.
like, because there's even the point when John touches her head and is like, what is going on with your brain? And
Yeah.
she just runs away, and he's like, whatever.
Yeah.
And he doesn't follow up on it at all.
Yeah, definitely. It's the way these people don't take care of each other is really, really fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, like the first time it said the body, because it seemed like we were deleting Gideon from the prose, like for a hot minute there, I was like, oh, the body is just Gideon. And it's just like the ghost of Gideon just like hovering around and haunting her. And I'm glad that wasn't actually what was happening here, that it's a little more complicated than that. And yeah, so I mean, I think that's the cool thing is even at the end of this book, I'm not sure if the body was entirely a hallucination or not. If the body is Annabelle Lee, right, or whatever her name was before God decided to call her Annabelle Lee.
I guess I'm not even sure about that, honestly. I mean, I think that's like the most parsimonious assumption, but I don't quite understand how any of that would work. But
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of things that are just still kind of up in the air about that stuff for sure. But yeah, I mean, sorry, it's a fascinating way to start. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about this, like writing structure wise, actually, is the fact that we we know like the people that read this book know how books work, and so we get to this moment and we just kind of assume like you did, like either quote unquote flashback or rewritten flashback, right?
Yeah.
When actually this is taking place in a very specific period in time in the very near present that's happening in the river. And I think it's really fun that Tamsin Muir like knows that you're going to make these assumptions because you are a trope aware modern reader of fiction, and so you're just going to go, oh, this is like a flashback scene, but it's like a rewritten flashback scene, so we're having fun with rewritten flashbacks. And it's just she knows you're going to do that, and she just kind of just lets you do that. And
Yeah.
I think that's just I think that's something that very clever and smart authors can do, is recognize that we are a society that is obsessed with tropes and categorizing things, and just let you categorize things wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do think she plays with that because my
Mm-hmm.
my interpretation at first was like, oh, okay, we're doing the whole the whole thing again, but we're doing it from uh Harrow's perspective, and Gideon's not there.
Yeah.
And then almost immediately, so like that's your first assumption, and then you're like, wait a second, this dialogue definitely didn't go this way. Wait a second, what is this sleeper in the basement of the house? Wait a minute, I don't remember these characters. Who is that character? Like, and then you realize like, oh, this is very different. What? Yeah, and then you yeah.
Yeah.
So she gives you enough information to get yourself in trouble with your assumptions, and then she
Yeah.
and then she contradicts it, which
There's
is
a
very,
woman.
like you
There's a
said.
woman with a hazmat suit shooting people in the face with guns, and I literally messaged you was like, "Now, Matt, it was a few months ago that I read this book. I don't remember there being someone shooting people in the face with guns."
Uh-huh.
And you're like, "That is correct."
That is correct. That was not. Yes. Uh, yeah. No, I mean, even just talking about this right now is making me think like, this would be a really fun book to reread, actually, because
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
you catch all these things that I definitely didn't catch the
Hmm.
first time. Like not says that get Harrow notices that when people say Ortus, that their mouth moves weird, and it's
Hmm.
because they're actually saying Gideon. That's not a
Yeah.
detail that I remembered, but
I do
sure.
remember that detail. I
Yeah.
mean, and this is like, I think it's funny because there are so many mysteries layered on top of each other in this book. And I do think that on some level, Muir knows that you're probably going to guess the Gideon Ortus name thing right away, and is fine with that.
Yeah. Exactly. That's yeah. Okay. Next slide, we have Harrow's letter to herself. Addressing the Reverend Lady Harrowhark Nonagesimus, known as the Reverend Daughter by her own desire, now Harrowhark the First, writing as the same, now dead. Letter number 2 of 24, to be read immediately on coherence. Harrowhark, as I write, it has been 48 hours since you became a lictor at Canaan House. By the time you read this, you will not recall the writing thereof, as the Harrowhark of the writing will be dead and gone. Her resurrection constitutes a fail state and must be avoided at all costs. This letter cannot answer questions. What I have done I will refer to as the work, and its character is actively harmful for you to know. I will instead provide guidelines on how to live the rest of your life. As you may as your life may hopefully now extend into the myriads, it is of enormous importance that you are not tempted to deviate from them. You are the living surety of promises I have made. Break troth with me, and from beyond my destruction I will brand you tomb heretic, cut off utterly from that which lies on the frozen altar, asleep and dead, removed from the adoration thereof, and any promise or part in her resurrection. Guideline number 1: stay alive. You may not end your own life through suicide. You may not end your own life through carelessness. Accidental death must be avoided at all costs and never accepted as an outcome. The work relies upon your continuance. Guideline number 2: you can never return to the ninth house. The way home is closed to you. Do not set foot within the house again. Do not allow yourself to be taken there by force. Guideline number 3: the sword will remain on you at all times. Wipe it down with your arterial blood nightly. Coat the blade in the ash which regrows. Do not cut flesh with the naked blade. Do not cut bone with the naked blade. Even this may not prove enough. Treat the sword as your promised death and act according to the first guideline.
And then the letter goes on from there, but we couldn't fit
Yeah.
the whole thing in there. First of all, threatening yourself
Uh-huh.
in a letter is like, if you don't do this, I will damn you for all eternity. Me.
The other fun thing, again, correct me if I misunderstood something here. The other fun thing is she's constantly making these allusions to the ninth house lore and saying like, um, she seems to hold the sort of religious convictions of the ninth house in this extremely high regard, and she says stuff like, "I'll
Yeah.
brand you a tomb heretic, cut off from that which lies on the frozen altar," and it's like, dude, you know that you are the worst heretic ever already because you already woke up the thing that lies on the frozen altar and it's not asleep in dead because it's haunting you. Like you broke all of the sacred rules of your own house, but she continues to kind of use it as this rhetorical device,
Yeah.
and it's a fascinating kind of uh, two-faced contradictoriness that is just really really interesting from a character who's basically a religious zealot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is. I think that perfectly shows kind of what zealotry does to a person. That, yeah, you're right. That, like, rationally, you've already done that, Harrow. You don't need to brand yourself a thing that you're. But to what Doom is saying right now as well is that, like, she's in love with the symbol of her religion, right? Like, I mean, technically she's in love with. Well, she's not in love with John. That's more complicated. But she's in, like, this. Her only love is the body in the tomb, and like, so it's like the image of her zealotry is the thing that she is most in love with. So it is the thing that she knows more than anyone, the clearest line of attack against her.
Mm. Yeah, I actually think you're right, Quantum, that she's threatening herself with no tomb GF,
Yeah.
which is very clever actually, because anybody else reading this is going to read it the way I just kind of interpreted it, where it's like just sort of a grandiose religious invocation, whereas I think that Harrow knows to read it as a actual personal threat
Yeah.
related to something that she cares about.
So my question for you: the sword. Obviously, the sword is Gideon, right? That is, why the sword makes her sick every time she touches it. It's because it's a memory of Gideon, and that she's mucked up her brain. Why is it so important to her and her plans that she keeps the remembrance of Gideon on her? Because, I mean, we'll learn that the sword is actually where the sleeper resides, right? That's where the sleeper came from. Does she know that in these letters?
I have no idea. I think the sword. I don't understand why the sword is magic. I mean, I always got that it was Gideon's giant sword. That was
Yeah.
always clear.
Well, yeah, like,
But why she can't touch it, I have no idea.
Well, to me, the reason she can't touch it is because this was Gideon's sword, and it's part of what she fucked with her head, and, like, it's the same reason she gets sick every time people talk about Gideon.
So people in not in chat says that there are several people in chat remind us that the sword has the ghost of Wake in it, and I don't understand why the sword has the ghost of Wake in it. Is my problem.
Because it's her sword.
Because it's Wake's sword.
I don't know.
Because it was always Wake's sword, right?
I don't know.
It was Wake's sword originally.
It's just a sword. It's just a sword that this chick's haunting.
Okay, she's haunted the sword. But why doesn't the sword matter? Oh, okay. Doom is saying in Gideon the Ninth, Harrow mentions that the sword hates her. So the sword is haunted in Gideon the Ninth too, but Gideon didn't notice because Gideon's not a necromancer.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. Okay, so I'm just an idiot. Got it.
Well, no, but that still doesn't answer my primary question, which is, why does Harrow why does she need to hold on to this sword? Like outside of the fact that, yes, the sword is haunted by Wake, which is how Wake is fucking with everything and haunting Harrow. Yes, Wake is Gideon's mother. Yes, like, the sword reminds her of Gideon because it was Gideon's sword. But, like, what in her plans? what does their plans have to do with the sword?
How does she know that Wake is in the
She
sword?
doesn't. I think she just knows that the sword doesn't like her for some reason that she doesn't understand.
But she has to keep the sword around her. Maybe I think a thought that I had at one point was that Gideon is in the sword, which is wrong,
Yeah.
obviously. Gideon is in her. But I was thinking Gideon's in the sword. She's trying to keep Gideon preserved and separate from her. Maybe she mistakenly thinks Gideon is in the sword.
Yeah, that could be.
I don't know. I don't know.
That I mean, that is absolutely what I thought too. That Gideon is her soul was cleaved from inside of Harrow and put into the sword, and she wants to keep it there to make sure it doesn't ever come back to her.
There's a lot going on in chat that is above my pay grade. I just want to mention before I forget how much I love the line in the book that's like, there had been another girl who grew up with Harrow, but she had died before she was born.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's like one of the very few little references in there.
I think it makes the most sense if she does think Gideon's in the sword in some way. And so, because, I mean, the reason Harrow does this whole thing is because she can't let Gideon go, right? And that's one of the constant themes of this book is people being unable to let other people go, right? Like,
yeah.
There's so many people that have died and they stick around out of just incredible stubbornness. Either they stick around or other people keep them around out of incredible stubbornness and unwillingness to let them go. And so she knows if she completes the Lictor thing that Gideon's essence will be subsumed into her and will cease to exist as its own individual entity, and she doesn't want that to happen, and so she prevents it from happening. And maybe on some level she thought, oh, I stuck it in this sword, which is this powerful anchor symbol for Gideon.
Yeah.
And ergo I need it around in case until I can figure out a way to resurrect her or something.
Yeah, I remember specifically thinking that Gideon was in the sword, but then being confused because you talked about how much the sword hates her, and I was like, even in death, Gideon wouldn't hate Harrow.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, well, maybe she hates her because she wiped out her memory. So I don't know. I had this dialogue with myself at one point.
Well, look, I think Harrow would probably think that Gideon hates her anyway because Harrow is a self-deprecating person who thinks everyone hates them because her whole life is surrounded by people that have died for her sake. You know, like we talked about this in Gideon, but the tragic beauty of this woman who is told from a very early age that hundreds of children died to make you alive, and then like the one child who didn't is the one child who you then are forced to watch sacrifice themselves so you can live again. You know, like that's like the 1-2 punch of that is kind of what breaks Harrow more than she was already broken, and kind of why she makes all these choices.
Mm-hmm.
So I fully believe that she would internalize that to the point of, oh, Gideon must hate me.
Yeah. That's stuff that we haven't talked much about because this is such a plotty and intricate book that it's tempting to just talk about that stuff the whole time. But
sure.
Like the level on which I think this book is fantastic is how every molecule of this book is about the idea of grief and loss. And not even grief due to death, but even grief of like being lovelorn. There are so many little plot threads about unrequited love, and there's a kind of grief that's intrinsic in unrequited love. That also a theme in Getting the Ninth, by the way. Just pervades everything. Like practically every interaction in this story is about either unrequited love or lost love, or you know. Or something. Yeah.
I mean, this is why I would just not be surprised at all to learn that the Emperor, like, killed the entire solar system to resurrect one person, because that's like the only way he could figure out how to do it. Like, I just wouldn't. And then once he did it, he got a bunch of power, and then said, "Oh, I can bring other people back too," or he brought other people back like incidentally, and was just like, "Okay, cool, I guess I brought more people back."
I mean, you sort of figure that he's the kind of guy who wants some worshipers around, so he probably spent a while being the only person in the universe, and then brought back enough people to make a civilization just to make sure that it worshipped him. Though the creepiest part to me was when he made a reference to like, I haven't had to clean house in a long time, and you understand that like cleaning house means just like killing everybody basically.
He's the most dangerous kind of god because he's like we already talked about, the god that tries to convince you he's not really a god until he decides to, and
Yeah.
then just like snaps his fingers and stops time, which is, I think I have a slide on this specifically, but he seems to have some powers that go beyond just the understanding of the systems of power in this world.
Yeah. 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 That's it's one of the big mysteries. Yeah.
Sure, sure. All right, so we move on to Harrow chatting with her god, and this is actually we're jumped way ahead, but this is where we get kind of the framing of what our narrative plot of the story is going to be. Just accept the proposition for now that a planet has an enormous single amount of thallergy. If this thallergy is converted, what might happen during the transition? We already know what happens, you said. Your tongue was growing thick in your mouth, and your eyelids were sore and swollen from wanting to close. The first rush of adrenaline had run its course. The body came and took your wrist in her hand and ringed her fingers around your bones quite tightly. This let you say, the cohort prepares a planet for necromancy every time they have to breach it. Over time, with an introduction of thanerogenic decay, I don't know why I couldn't say that movie, the planet converts. Necromancy proceeds as normal afterwards. Nothing happens. Plant and animal life both change, of course, and eventually the planet flips totally and the population has to be moved. But that's such a long-term process that it takes generations. Now kill the planet all at once, said her emperor. What then? You looked at him. The emperor of the 9 houses raised his hands, palms up, as though offering a helpless prayer to the roof of the cargo hold. His alien eyes were cool and calm. You know of only one mass of dying off planets. So you said, you tell me, Lord. You were there for the resurrection. Yes, he said, and I saw the thallergy convert immediately. The difference between dying of illness and dying from murder. An enormous shock, the immediate expulsion of the soul. And just as when a soul is ripped untimely from a human being, when a soul is so rudely taken from a planet. Sweat came to the centers of your palm, totally unbidden. A trickle of blood started down your leg, and you stopped in it mid-flow, dried it to flakes on your skin, and clotted the breach. Such an act took no effort now. A revenant, you said. Always a revenant, he said. Every single time a goddamn revenant. Pardon the pun. You fancied you could see the body breathing, her chest rising very slightly in and out. The Emperor crossed his arms and stared across the cargo hold, his face lit from beneath by electric lighting, the gleam of his eyes black and wet. You caught him moistening his lips with the tip of his tongue. We call them resurrection beasts, he said. So this is our plot, right? The plot is that there are these 9, I guess, technically, giant resurrection revenant monsters that have been chasing the Emperor for 10,000 years. And this is what they're going to do. One is coming to their hideout, and they're going to stand and fight, and they got to kill it. I will say, it is remarkable to me how little of the plot actually has to do with that at all. You know, it's the bumpers on our story. It's the framing of what our story is. But like, we don't actually see the fight with the resurrection beast because it doesn't matter really.
Yeah, and it's such an abstract fight too. I mean, I actually love how Lovecraftian it is, because it's like, what does it look like? It just kind of makes you go crazy. You see stuff and you scream and you lose control of your emotions and you go crazy, and then you literally lose consciousness.
Yeah.
And then your cavalier takes over, and then they basically just fight monsters. And you never really see what the beast itself looks like. Which I think is more fun, as I've said many times, than actually just having a description of a monster.
It is more fun, but I just like it's so funny to me that like this is the ticking clock of the whole story basically, and it's not actually the story we're telling.
Yeah, I agree. It's really just the distraction almost that the other lictors are using to kind of maneuver Jod into this position where they can hopefully kill him, because they've been plotting for thousands of years.
A long time.
A depressingly long time, considering that it doesn't work.
So I mean, I think they're so cool, and like some of the action sequences with Gideon in Harrow's body fighting the beasts is some of my favorite parts of the book. Really cool.
Yeah, I thought it was it's kind of interesting in retrospect that he tells her that that's where the resurrection beasts came from, because I sort of think he's telling the truth, except the part he's not telling the truth about is, I strongly suspect that he's the one who killed the solar system.
Yeah, I mean, like he's basically saying like they're saying that, you know, humanity killed itself, and then I sacrificed all the planets of the solar system to resurrect humanity,
Mm-hmm.
and planets have souls, etc., etc., etc. So it worked. It made a bunch of energy, and it made these revenants because the planets are mad at me. But I still suspect that he killed a bunch of people too. Like, I mean, again, not a lot of hints of this, but I do like one of the planets that they are sent to because one of the recurring beats of the story is they have to go to the outlining planets to destroy them because the resurrection beast will eat it up on its way and it just get bigger and stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're doing that, and one of the planets Harrow is sent to is like they're supposed to just be like, you know, microbial life, like very primitive life, and she keeps seeing more and more hints that there's way more life here going on, and they're just indifferent to it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, man, that's one of the weirdest things about the universe that Tamsin Muir has created here. We have such a limited window of any of the rest of the existence outside of these like 20 people.
Yeah.
Like there's cohorts flying around, like armies doing battles, and there's other civilizations out there that have nothing to do with the necromancers. Like there's a whole big giant world out here, and our scope is so shrunken and limited. We don't get any, like, there's no feeling of like what the culture of those places, like what the overarching culture of humanity even is anymore. It's a fascinating choice, and I do think it's intentional. I do think she's doing this on purpose. It's not I'm bad at world building. It's just I crafted this world and then only showed you a tiny piece of it. It's really interesting.
It was so shocking the first time we encounter the idea that there are these like rebels who think that, you know, not only is he not God, but that he's this horrible monster, this war criminal, and we haven't heard about them at all. And it's like you get the sense that even Harrow doesn't know about them. Like this is news to her too, and you know who knows what else she doesn't know about, right? Because she's led this extremely closeted life on Pluto.
Yes. Although they've never actually said Pluto, but
oh yeah, the Quantum is reminding me of something that the sun appears to be dead, which is not normal.
Yeah, he resurrects. He not only does he resurrect humanity, but he resurrects the sun.
Right, but the sun, like, I think it kind of implies that the sun dying is. I mean, my guess would be that somehow he killed the sun, and that's how he killed the solar system. And then when he got his powers, he resurrected the sun. Which, by the way, like if we can just nerd out about his level of power for a second, like it's no surprise that they can't kill him because he's like Dr. Manhattan level powerful if he's just going around like snapping his finger and changing literal stars. Like to find that he could rewind himself from death, a la Dr. Manhattan, you're just like, yeah, that makes sense. It's not surprising.
Yeah, he's got time magic for sure, sure.
That too, yeah.
All right, wanna move on?
Let us move on. Oh wait, hold on. So here we are.
Jesus Christ.
We observe the relationship between John and his two longtime lictors, which is complicated. All three of them fell silent at the altar. The wasted body in front of them would no longer laugh too much in any case. Augustine said, "Does anyone remember her name, her actual house name? Didn't she have one?" The emperor suggested Heptane, but Augustine said, "No, you're thinking of Loveday. We've forgotten it. That's unnatural. Who would have ever thought we could forget a thing like that?" Mercy Morn stood. She tucked her hair behind her ears and away from her deceptively serene oval face, and she crossed primly to the back of the altar. She put her hands behind her back as though afraid to touch anything with them. She looked at Cytherea's dead face with an intensity that was in its own way worse than tenderness. It was as though she were willing something from the corpse, like she could conjure something through sheer force of wanting. "Call her Cytherea Loveday," she said. "That's what she wanted to be called, and I found it unbearable and glutinous then, and I find it unbearable and glutinous now. But that is what she said. I never saw her cry except once," she added in a pointless rush, "the day after, when we put together the research, when she became a lictor. I said there was no alternative. She said..." At this point she broke off. Thankfully, she did not glance in your direction. Augustine was staring at the floor, hands crossed demurely in a posture of awkward respect, and the Emperor was looking up at Mercy. But you could, but all you could see was the back of his head, where mother of pearl leaves and baby finger bones adorned his hair. The candlelight flickered heartlessly over all of you. He asked, "What did she say?" The other lictor said nothing for a moment. She cleared her throat. She said, "We had the choice to stop." After a second, the prince, undying, sank his head into his hands. A stylus fell out of his pocket and rolled across the sleek black and bone tiles. It was the first time that he had seemed at all mortal. Humanity touched him briefly, like a passing shadow. Then Augustine said, quite irreverently, "I wouldn't have called it glutinous. She was just lucky that Cytherea Loveday trips off the tongue. Now mine would alliterate in a way I couldn't have abode." "I will say this," said Mercy presently, acting as though Augustine had never said a word. "I never mourned for Loveday Heptane. She did one good thing in her life, and she knew it."
So, lots to love here, Matt. One of the things that I like so much about the structure of this book is that we have these three, I guess technically four, eternal beings that have been together for thousands and thousands of years, and they have their own very complex relationships with each other. And because we're in the point of view of someone who doesn't understand all this, we're kind of learning it as we go. And I just love it. I mean, I love the moments where they admit that like they don't even have to speak in full sentences to each other because they just get each other. It's like a thing that we will never experience because we're just never going to live long enough. But
Don't speak for yourself.
oh wow, okay. But it's really powerful, and just the ways that like it adds to part of the confusion, and I think it's understandable why they are just not explaining things more to these what they look to as babies that have only been alive for 18 or 22 years, because like they've been around for so long. No, I'm not going to explain the political dynamics of our relationship with God to you. Like I don't have time for that shit. I got my other stuff going on.
Right. It can't be explained. I mean, I really think that is one feature of this I liked, is that these beings, they're barely even people anymore. Like they're
Yeah.
10,000 years old. they're so old that they have probably like broken and remade themselves into the simulacrum of a functioning human being dozens and dozens of times. And what you're seeing is just like what they choose to present precisely.
Yeah.
And they can use this shorthand, which just shows you how just how much experience they have. Also, they appear to have like nearly perfect memory. So,
but isn't it funny that their original sin, the thing that makes them eternal, the thing that makes them lictors, is still the thing that is absolutely ruling them. 10,000 years later, the decision to eat the soul of one of the people closest to you for power is still a thing that absolutely rules them. You can tell by the way they talk about their cavaliers, by the way they get so pissed off when other people talk about their cavaliers, by the way they talk about other lictors' cavaliers. Like, this is a thing that, like, you're absolutely right that these people are almost not people anymore, but this sin it rules them. And I mean, this is the reason for their eventual, quote unquote betrayal of God, is that they learned that it was a needless sacrifice, and that infuriates them to the point of killing their daddy.
mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. They have been warped by it.
Mm-hmm. Because like you think, or you'd want to think that like a human being could have the capacity of like getting over a bad thing that they've done, but they can't. They cannot do that. And I think part of that is because the soul, the person that they did that to, is in them, is part of them. And so it is just this constant, perpetual guilt and grief machine.
Yeah, this is something I wanted to talk about, actually, is the idea that nobody gets over anything in this book, on like very, very intentionally and explicitly. I'm spoiling everything and jumping to the end, but Harrow, very conspicuously doesn't get over things. Like, in the end, she's like, I guess I'm just gonna lie down and die because, or something metaphysical.
Well, she's gonna do exactly what's in the slide, right? We had a choice to stop, and that's what she does. She has to, choose between, deleting Gideon,
Hmm.
or staying in the river, and she chooses to just lie down.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Which I mean, I guess that's the right, I don't know, the right choice, the choice that she won't regret,
Yeah.
because she'll definitely, but we have ample evidence that she would regret making the other choice.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, like the whole bit when they're in the river and they're talking to all the the other house people. There's also all this subtext of people who have never gotten over their losses, right? So it's not just about, I said a minute ago, it's about grief, it's about loss, it's about being lovelorn. It's not just about that. It's about people who are still struggling with those losses. Like
Hmm.
no one in the story is like, yeah, I lost someone, but I'm fine now. Never. Like no one ever even comes close to saying that.
Yeah.
It's always the wound is always still fresh and present with them,
Yeah.
no matter
What's
what.
her name flies, fully across the entire galaxy with a chunk of skull to look for Harrow, just to make sure that their necromancer might still be hanging around there somewhere.
Yeah.
Like these people are totally incapable of letting go of anything. And I mean, it's interesting because we see here that there's this afterlife, quote unquote, that is the river, and then we learn that there are people that believe that there is a thing that you can cross the river, that there's something beyond that there's something else, and most people completely reject that idea.
Yeah. Right. That's one fascinating thing about the sort of pseudo Christianity of this world is they don't really have a concept of an afterlife. Like the
Yeah,
river is this like hell
yeah,
basically.
yeah,
Um, it's I mean it's the river Styx, except it's like that's all there is you just go into this river that
yeah.
kind of consumes you. Um,
Doom is pointing a great quote that lines up exactly what you're talking with here. Love is the inability to get over someone, just clinging on to everything you can of them forever. I don't know a lot about love, but no.
yeah, I mean I
No.
wonder what direction the arc of this
Yeah.
story is heading, because that seems to be kind of the thesis statement so far.
Yeah.
Um, Doom also reminds us of Magnus hanging onto the corner of the dance card that his love gave him when they were courting, as being another great just like way of encapsulating the whole theme of the story.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's right. But bipolar on there is a hell. There's just not a heaven.
Yeah. There's the Hell River, and then there's the butthole that sends you to Hell.
Double hell. Yeah. Yeah. Also, yeah. Thanks, Doom. Love is a revenant, and it accumulates love stuff.
Doom is like gonna be our like go to like give me a quote and page number, because I
Yeah.
guess you've read this book so many times that you just know it all.
Yeah. Right. I mean, also like pointing out that Harrow herself has this kind of horrible the idea of love and the idea of suicide are bound up together in her mind and her thoughts.
Hmm.
One of them always follows the other in her head, in her monologue.
Yeah, I mean when like the act of creating you is bound up with the act of murdering innocence,
Hmm.
like it's just every emotion is so confused
Yeah.
here.
Well, just and also the ninth house is the worst place
Yes.
in the universe. Like her parents never touched her or showed her any love. They're
Hmm.
all just like calculatedly trying to make her the best necromancer ever,
Yeah.
and then they killed themselves because of her. And it just like just God, what
What
a
a
nightmare.
fucking nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah.
My God. Speaking of the ninth house,
Uh-huh.
let's talk about this moment where Harrow reveals to the Emperor how she was made. No doubt, said the Emperor, but Harrowhark, even as a product of two obvious geniuses, you are a walking miracle, a unique theorem, a natural wonder. You looked at him, and you said, I have just told you that I am the product of my parents' genocide. The Emperor set down his tea and finished off his biscuit, and did that terrible thing that he did on occasion. He reached over to touch your shoulder in that brief, tentative way, the lightest and swiftest of gestures, as though afraid he might burn you. Your mother had guided your hands over bloating corpses. Your father had held down the corners of great tomes, and his sleeve had brushed your 6-year-old fingers as he showed you how to best turn their pages. Both of them had pressed a rough rope made of coated fiber into your hands. You recalled the pressure from their palms, their attempts to be gentle. When the Emperor touched you, Your body recalled, unbidden, each rare and terrible touch committed by your mother and father. God said, I will shepherd your dead 200. I will take on their burden to mourn and cherish in more ways than you'll understand right now, and I'll remember your parents, who did such a god-awful thing to my people and theirs. I will remember it until the universe contracts in on itself and wipes clean what they did, and makes blank such an indelible stain. I acknowledge to you and to infinity that I am the Emperor of the Nine Houses, the Necrolord Prime, and that their stain must be regarded as my stain. Consider it my crime, Harrow Hark. I pledge myself to making it right. A red heat had begun at your exoskeleton's necklet, traveled up to your throat, darkened your face beneath your paint, until you felt as though you had been held too close to a stove. You said, Lord, you can't. Teacher, have mercy on me. Please, don't tell anyone. A child's plea. Nobody has to know. To God. For a moment he changed. He grew angry, and you thought it was at the rank foolishness, the irresponsibility of what you'd said. Those monstrous, unnatural eyes narrowed, and his mouth became hard as the stones and the rocks that had made up the planetoid you later slaughter. For a moment you perceived a hint of his great immortal age, of an enormous distance between you, of an ignition too bright for you to conceive. You were an insect standing before a forest fire. You were a cell beholding a heart. So, this is the moment where I started to go, oh, this guy's not good.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I already had the feeling, but like the idea of she's revealing what she feels is her great sin, you know, something that she's not even responsible for, but that she takes and has internalized in herself so much that her existence is born off the death of hundreds of people, and he's just kind of amazed at the necromancy of it at first.
Mm-hmm.
And then she kind of explains why she feels this way, and I don't know, maybe I'm off base here, but I just feel like he's not helping here. Like, this isn't actually helping.
Yeah.
I imagine going to therapy and being like, so like my parents killed a bunch of people and that's why I'm here, and them being like, I will take this great horrible sin from you, Harrow.
Yeah, right. It seems to me to be the sort of performative thing that he imagines will be impressive and what God is supposed to say, but it's inhuman. It's not.
Yeah.
There's no real empathy there. I mean,
Yeah.
which that's kind of what she's connecting with. She's realizing that like he doesn't get it. He doesn't really remember what it's like to suffer and to love and to feel bad about people dying, because I mean, I think to him people are ants at this point.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with what Doom is saying, that he is not helping her. He's trying to help himself. Like, he feels the guilt of the thing, like, because the guilt of the thing that he did matches what was done for Harrow, right? Like, he committed that same thing. We're suspecting.
Yeah, exactly. What's funny is I'm actually unsure whether he feels any guilt for that. I think what he still has to live with the consequences of it because the resurrection beasts are chasing him, but I'm actually unsure whether he actually feels bad about it.
Yeah. I think Quantum it brought up a great point that I think is this exact, like, we go back to, this is, Christianity, and this is going to confession. This is confessing your sins to a priest, and priest saying, do 50 Hail Marys, I absolve you of your sin. I, God, I, Jesus, have taken your sin upon me, which is literally what Christ did. Like, that is literally what Christianity says, is that Christ has taken all our sins upon himself, and they are his sins now. They're not your sins anymore, which is like great for like getting into the gates in the after party, but like not actually too great about making yourself feel better about the things that you've done or the things that you feel responsible for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Such an interesting character. And I think for me, it makes it more fun that Harrow is consistently in awe of him and thinks of him as God, even though we, the reader, are becoming more and more aware that he is not entirely on the level.
Yeah. And like everyone else, no one else treats him this way. Like, and it's not just the lictors that are old and have been with him for thousands of years, because Xanthe doesn't treat him this way either, right? Um,
Yeah, that's interesting to me because I don't actually understand why. I mean, I guess that's just her character. She's just extremely irreverent and
yeah,
doesn't really respect anyone.
yeah. I mean, like Harrow, as she says, Harrow is a nun, and she's not. Like, I feel
uh,
like that the ninth house is the most religious of all the houses for sure.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think they really think of him as God in the way that we would think of like, oh, it's the
No,
resurrection. It's like, well, it's this really old guy who's magic. Is what, yeah.
I mean they call him like she interchangingly says emperor and god and lord here, right?
Hmm.
I don't know if anyone else in this book calls him god. I think they call him the emperor. I think they call him John, but I don't think they call him God.
I think you're right. All right.
Speaking of her, this is a great transition.
This is a great transition to Harrow decides she needs to kill uh, the Ortus that the lictor stalking her.
The Ortus Lictor, the Gideon Lictor.
Yeah, Gideon. Gideon. Then you said, I accept your help. I am forced to admit that I cannot do this alone. I live for your forced admissions, said Ianthe. It would have been a pain if you'd said no. I've already organized everything. You both fell silent. The canopy of the four-poster bed obscured the fresco on the over-decorated ceiling, which was a relief to the eye. Her covers were softer than the covers in your room, though you thought the mattress too squashy for real comfort. One sank down into it like a bog. You were not used to so many pillows, nor were you used to the slippery chill of satin on your skin, nor were you used to hearing someone else's breath, insubstantial, beside you. For a moment you thought Ianthe had fallen asleep. Then she said, idly, Coronabeth and I spent 3 nights apart in all our lives, and the second time she cried so hard that she threw up. I hope she's sleeping easy now. When she doesn't, she gets bags under her eyelids. You could carry water in. It seemed as though a response was expected, but you did not want to speak of the dead twins. You simply said, I have always slept alone. You don't say. You heard the primness in your voice when you said, I am betrothed to the locked tomb, Tridentarius. I slept on a cot in my cell. I always forget that you were an honest-to-God nun, and 6 years old to boot if you listen to Mercy Morn. How old are you really, Harry? 18, and my tolerance for Harry wears thin. 18, she said, in the tones of the jaded, fagged-out social. I remember being 18. You are 22. It's a universe away from 18. You lay in that bed like a marble sculpture, your body remote and far away. Sleep and safety had blunted your panic, but not arrested it wholesale. If Ianthe reached out to touch your arm, you were afraid you might not understand whose arm she was touching. You were so afraid she might touch you. You were so afraid anyone might touch you. You had always been afraid of anyone touching you, and had not known your longing flinch was so obvious to those who tried it.
That last sentence is almost like the reason why I pulled this whole thing. But
Yeah.
I think this is really the moment, Matt, that we get to talk about their relationship, which is so interesting and complex, because there's obviously a lot of sexual tension going on here, right? Like she makes her an arm, and I think it's. Whew. I wish I kind of pulled the arm scene, because there's a lot there you could just read as getting it on when she's building an arm for her. But
Yeah, she bones her.
damn it, I hate you. But you're totally right.
That was my first thought, honestly.
That's so stupid. I love it. Yeah, so like it's just this complicated relationship, because I don't know if Harrow is like able to love anyone actually, but she wants it so badly, and she also hates, like, she's a character who is both sides of everything, right?
Hmm. Yeah, that's the best kind of character. Is the wants and needs are very very much in tension. They're sort of there's a very specific thing I want to say where it's like the fact that the tension is so evident, but it's so crucial to the character that it never be acknowledged
Yeah.
creates this like vibrating anxiety over like, okay, this can't persist. Like she can't go on like this. She's
Mm-hmm.
going to explode one way or the other. And you know that, and like you feel it, and like the character feels it too. That's what makes it so compelling.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
as confusing as it can be as a story, I think what kept me turning the page was like, I have to see what happens with this character.
Yeah, and I mean I didn't pull the slide, but the moment where Gideon kind of confronts her and is just like, raking her over the coals because Gideon hates her in so many ways. Just like she could never love you. Like everything you're trying here, it's not working. And I do think Yanthe, like, she was into Harrow a little bit. Like that's the contradiction of her as well. That like, yeah, she was doing a lot of things. She was literally gaslighting her in some ways, but she was also kind of into it too. And it's really, really complex stuff that I just really enjoyed.
Yeah, I think the thing about her is she is a human. She has
Yeah.
needs. She has normal emotions, but she wears this guise of total disdain and being above it all
Yeah.
and jadedness, and it's not real,
Yeah.
and we see cracks of it every now and then.
She sucks. I love her.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, wanna move on?
Yes.
Okay, so where were we? Okay.
Slide 11.
Slide 11. Wow. Okay. So back in the flashbacks, we see that people are getting murdered one by one by a sleeper with a shotgun, and then teacher says some interesting stuff here. So let's talk about it. Then time is against us, said Ortus. Time was always against us, said Abigail. Oh, time, time, said a voice from the doorway. Time means very little. Mastery does. This temple stood for 10,000 years untouched, but all but time's clumsiest pawing. But then its master was the master, for whom even the river will part. Time is nothing to the king everlasting. It was teacher. He wore his white woolen tunic with its beautiful rainbow sash, and his sandals and a little white half cap, but nothing else to keep out the cold. He had a bottle of apple-colored liquid in his hand that he took a pull from every so often, the sharp reek of which made Harrow's nose crinkle. To their silence he added, I believe we are now being punished for what they did. Even the devil bent for God to put a leash around her neck, and the disciples were scared. I cannot blame them. I was terrified. But when the work was done, when I was finished, and so were they, and the new lictors found out the price, they bade him kill the saltwater creature before she could do them harm. Oh, but it is a tragedy to be put in a box and laid to wait for the rest of time. It happens to me, but I was only a man, or perhaps 50 men. Reverend daughter, your whole house treads upon a knife's edge as keepers of such a zoo. He caught her gaze on the bottle. His very blue eye twinkled like a little madly, and he said with greater calm, It's thistle shrub, child. I could not get drunk on it if I tried, and how I have tried. Ortus said, You speak in riddles, old man. Then let me speak plainly, said teacher. You worship a monster in a box and play at being the masters of its tomb. Now we have a monster in a box, and it has become obvious that it means to master us all. Canaan House has never changed its color, nor its shape, nor with the seasons. I should know. We measured summer to winter, temperature and precipitation, and the acidity of the very sea beneath us, and it never hailed, and it never snowed, and we certainly never saw fimbrae hanging from the rafters. Let me prophesy in my old age. The sleeper is getting up to the strength to wake completely and colonize what it finds. I fear, God, how I fear. So teacher, Matt, let's talk about teacher a little bit. What do you think of this guy?
So is this just to be clear, is this the actual ghost of the actual teacher dude who we met in Gideon the Ninth?
I don't know. I
mean, I assume that everyone in the house in this part of the story is actually the ghost of the person who they appear to be.
Yes, I think so. And the question I have is, do they know that they're dead and that this is...
I think they eventually figure it out.
Yeah, well, we know that, but do they know the whole time?
They don't start out knowing.
Yeah.
they start out kind of as swept up in the illusion as Harrow is, except maybe the ones who are particularly good spirit magicians or something, because they might have more insight. But teacher, I mean, so he says a bunch of stuff here that we understand a little bit better than Harrow does.
Yes.
Not not completely, but there's a lot of the references to the devil, which I suppose is God's cavalier who he put in the locked tomb, right?
Annabelle Lee.
Annabelle Lee, who I'm gonna guess is not actually a devil. The reference to like a saltwater creature, I'm like,
I don't know, man.
I'm like, I guess
I don't know, man.
There's all sorts of stuff where I'm like, okay, all right. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about teacher? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he's this amalgamation of 50 souls, right? Like, really, really interesting stuff. I don't know what to do with a lot of this, and that's why I pulled it, because I just wanted to talk to everyone about it. The Annabelle Lee poem, by the way, this is what I love reading, because you just remember things about yourself. When I just remember being a middle school obsessed with the Annabelle Lee poem, because it's just, I love Edgar Allan Poe so much.
Okay, so people are, so it's Annabelle Lee was buried by the sea in the Poe poem, and the river is salt water, and that's why it's okay. See, I didn't know this reference. I'm illiterate. So that's cool. I get it. And so, but he was apparently like there for that. So teacher is like super duper old. I guess that's not really news to us either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no.
Very interesting.
But the idea that like, I don't know, man. I don't like. It's just it's really interesting stuff that at the time you're reading it means almost nothing, and then it means a little bit more by the end of the book, but still not a whole lot.
Right. Yeah. It's delightful, ambiguous writing where you're like, I think I understand what that means, but yeah, I just love it. I don't have much else to say about this slide, honestly.
Yeah, I think as Quantum is pointing out, there's something with saltwater and Lictor, aka Annabelle, that is interesting here, and I don't know what it is. I mean, saltwater is like, water is the symbol of like life, and saltwater is the opposite of that, at least for humans. So I don't know, man. I don't know what to do with this stuff. We're getting into the phase of the show where I'm just gonna have a lot of slides that I'm gonna be like, I don't know what to do with this stuff. Did I lose you?
Your audio went real bad, Scott.
What did it do?
It went robo Scott.
Fucking Skype, man. Is it
apparently
better now?
Well, apparently it's the people in the chat are saying it too.
Oh yeah.
It's not better. It's the same. Apparently mine is bad too, they say.
Well, it's gotta be my internet then.
Should we hang something up and come back to reset the Skype connection?
Well, it's not. Mine wouldn't be Skype, because I'm only Skyping to you. You're, like, the people are hearing me directly from my computer, so. I don't know. I don't know why it would do that. That's weird.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, we could close some things and reopen them if that's all I can think of. I'm not...
Well, okay. My soundboard is doing this thing that it does when it's not working right, so I'm gonna turn this off and on again, and we'll see what that does. So, you're gonna lose me totally for a second.
Okay. This is the first.
Okay, I am back.
I hear you normally now.
Okay, that's good. But when I did that, it fucked up our recording, so. Woo.
I mean, well, can we just start a new one?
Yeah.
Okay.
What the fuck? Okay. Sorry about that, folks. That's my very expensive soundboard just deciding to break every so often.
Cool.
So thanks, Rodecaster. Waiting for microphone access? God, I hate everything. Sorry, folks.
This is how the sausage is made, surprisingly often.
Yeah, honestly, yes. Hey, use that. Hey, use that, dummy. I'm so annoyed. I'm so annoyed. There was a problem accessing your microphone. Why? Why was there a problem accessing my... There we go. There we go. Okay.
So salt water.
Okay. So that is all taken care of. So that can be done and over there.
Did we lose the first recording?
No, it's... I see an hour and 30 minutes there on...
Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
All right, good. Then we're back. We're back.
It never happened,
Never
folks,
happened.
on the audio. The people that are listening to the audio will never know any of this happened.
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, there's definitely something going on with Electo, and the idea that the teacher kind of says here that she's not. The problem with dead is in this world, dead doesn't mean anything really because you can die multiple times. So like when teacher says here that like she's not dead to be put in a box and laid to wait for the rest of time, that she's just like chilling in there, not dead, whether or not that means she died in her body and is now the ghost that is haunting Harrow. I don't fucking know, man.
Yeah, I mean, teacher said he made her as dead as he could make her, which doesn't mean dead. Yeah, I mean, people in the chat are mirroring my confusion that I'm like, who the heck is in the tomb, and who is haunting her, and is it Electo or not? Because I'm just so unsure. Anyway, I don't think we're going to resolve that in this conversation.
Well, I mean, if you take the book literally, Harrow's assumption becomes, I never got into the tomb because the only way to get into the tomb was by breaking the blood wards of the Emperor himself, which only he could do, or if he like steal his jizz and put it in someone and make a baby.
But that happened. So.
Well, yeah, but it didn't happen. It didn't. I mean, it did. I don't fucking know.
But see, my supposition is something like Gideon exists, and Gideon is in the ninth house, and so maybe just because Gideon is around, or her blood is around, or whatever, now you can open the tomb like that. I would buy some variation on that,
I guess, sure. I mean, there like the book basically says, or that Harrow believes, that the, or at least at some point in the book, that the body that she's seeing the whole time was just like her being crazy.
So Doom says that just before she went into the tomb, she had a fight with Gideon where she scratched up Gideon's face and she had her blood on. Yeah, so she had her blood, so that's how she got in. So God is just wrong. All right, well, that's resolved.
Did I read this book? I don't remember that at all.
This is I do. I just didn't remember that it happened just before this. Or there was any sort of reference to. Yep. Okay, much less of a mystery now.
Okay, right. So then the body is real. She's not crazy, or at least she's not entirely crazy, and she is seeing the ghost of Electo.
Yes, sort of something. All right, sounds good. Everyone. Thank you. Shall we move on to Harrow's complicated relationship with God?
Sure.
I'm going to put the glasses back on because they help. You do not say, I am sorry. You do not offer sympathy. As with many mysteries, this one had turned out to be sad and dull. The Emperor of the Nine Houses had someone, and then, like all his lictors, the Emperor of the Nine Houses had lost someone. It was your story. It was Ianthe's story. It was the story of Augustine, and of Mercymorn, and of Ortus. It was Cytherea's story, and that of all the lictors who had died over that long and dark sheaf of years. I understand why cavaliers primary carry their house titles, said God. It makes sense, but it is a corruption of the original. Do you know why you're really the first? Because in a very real way, you and all the others are Ael's children. There would be none of you if not for her. And then the Emperor of the Nine Houses set down his empty mug of tea with the residue of ginger biscuit crumbs within it. You had no idea in those seconds after the gentle clink upon the table's surface as the universe held its breath that he was about to say the worst thing that had ever been said to you. The fine, forbearing lines at his forehead and at his eyes crinkled earnestly, and he said, I like to think that she would like you. You'd make a hell of a daughter, Harrowhark. I sometimes indulge in the wish that you'd been mine. There had been a moment in your life when you were convinced that you were about to spoil your substance at the foot of Ianthe, Tridentarius's altar. You had been granted reprieve. There was no such reprieve for you in that moment. You had not sold the marrow of your soul for stolen eyes and a half-hearted kindness. What dismantled you, you bereft idiot, was not even the god who made the ninth house, the emperor all-giving, the kindly prince. Your end appeared in the form of a grown adult telling you that they might have liked you for their own. You hurled the glass at the table. It shattered into a flower of water with a crackling multitude of shards and sepals. You stood upon the table. It creaked beneath your weight. God had half stood to stop you when you sank to your knees on the glass. You kneeled into obeisance on the razor-sharp fragments, pressed your palms down upon the shrapnel, and you folded yourself onto the wet and bleeding penitence before him.
This is sad. I'm just sad now.
Yeah.
This is real sad.
Yeah. I mean, this is the way in which Harrow is entirely screwed up, even setting aside the hallucinations and
even setting aside, like, I love that it's not even that, like, certainly that it is God is it makes it, but like it's not even that it's God. It's just someone wants me to be their daughter.
Yeah. So someone likes me.
Someone likes me.
Not even loves, just someone likes me kind of for who I am, and appreciates me.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Too much.
It's the worst thing that anyone has ever been said to you.
Yeah. And then she goes into this immediate terrible bleeding penitence, and he's like horrified by it, and he's like, no, stop. And this is one of those things that I think, like, I think this guy's a monster, and he's not good, and he's done terrible things. I do think a lot of this is him, like, fucking around with things that he didn't understand, and, like, headed down paths that he didn't fully comprehend. And so, like, at one point in his life, he'd probably be like, it would be neat if people worshipped me as a god. And he didn't fully understand what that meant, you know, and what that does to people. And then he sees people like Harrowhark, which are, like, kind of one of the natural end lines of setting yourself up as a god and letting people worship you, is this kind of horribly destructive, self-violent love of you, and he can't deal with it. And it's just like he wants to play both sides, right? That's his biggest thing. It's like he wants to be God, he wants people to worship him, but he also doesn't want this uncomfortable kind of worship. It's like, sorry, bud.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't think I had necessarily thought of him as a monster at this point in the story. I don't really remember exactly, honestly. But in retrospect, I almost feel like him saying, you know, I would have liked you as a daughter is just something that he has figured out over thousands of years. People like to hear. Like, if you were a manipulative psycho and you wanted to sort of ingratiate yourself to someone who obviously worshipped you, then you could definitely do worse than saying, like, you know, you're just great. I wish I'd had you for a son, you know. Like you know that's going to make somebody feel really good and feel special, even if you don't mean it at all.
Yeah.
So I don't know that he meant it at all, you know.
I don't know. I think he means it. I do.
I think he means it, but also he sort of sees them all as chess pieces in the first place. Like, he maybe he does want to see, like, kind of wish she were his daughter, but also he would kill her if she was inconvenient, you know.
Well, yeah, totally. I think that yeah,
that's what I mean, is like he's not really capable of love anymore. So that's what I mean when I say he doesn't mean it.
Sure. No. Yeah. I think he believes that he means it.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, it's and like I don't know if I pulled the slide. I think it's way past. But there's this line where Gideon says something, or not Gideon, sorry, Harrow says something to the effect of, and it was that moment that I realized that God didn't understand me at all. Which is like not what you want from your deity, right? Like if you believe in a higher power, if anyone should understand you at your core, who you are as a human being, it should be God. And God doesn't get Harrow at all.
Yeah. Not reminding us of the kind of the lesser necromancer who did this incredibly elaborate blood ward on the shuttle toward the beginning of the story, and almost bled out and died, just like out of just like, if you have the opportunity to do some magic for God, you're gonna basically do your best. You're gonna try to martyr yourself for it, you know?
Yeah.
Because like, if you did any less than that, then you must not really care.
He's so casual at the immense self-destruction and harm people will do to for his glory, you know? Like, you just can't, like, if you're gonna call yourself a god, you gotta take that shit seriously, because people are gonna behave that, like, you know, like, you can't be, it's like you can't be a parent and their best friend, you know? Like, you can't be a god and their buddy at the same time. You just can't.
Yeah. You know, when that happened, it was kind of a funny moment, but in retrospect, it's one of those things where it's like, no, like, if you take it at face value, it's actually extremely horrible, and it says a lot about him as a character that he was able to just be like, these young necromancers always trying to martyr themselves for me. And it's like, holy shit, dude, like, you're perpetuating this.
Yeah.
You've lived on this ship for 70 years. You could have cultivated a different culture, you know?
Yeah. Stop allowing people to worship you as a god and just be like, hey, I'm just a dude who was like really good at research and I found all this cool shit.
That's a great point, Quantum. And another beat of just like him, like, this played off as a joke that's actually a huge clue, is that he keeps serving this tea that Harrow hates every time they meet.
And of course she keeps drinking it and keeps eating the terrible cookies, and like, it doesn't even cross his mind that, hey, maybe people pretend to like things for me because I'm God.
Right. It's great.
It's wonderful. Hey, slide 13. Gideon is back, baby. Let's read the Gideon's backslide and let's talk about her. You were gone. You'd left me behind, inside you. Fuck, I said. It wasn't my voice. Fuck. Oh shit. Oh fucking hell. Help. Yuck. Arg. In the darkness of that hot and bony corridor, something bumbled into view before you. Us. Me. Which at least forestalled my full-on physical emotional breakdown. It was a nice nightmarish nonsense of wasp and bone and meat, and it was alive, and when it saw me, it stopped. The thing's bulk was set out on a stretched-out human-like frame, like a person walking crab fashion, feet planted flat and hands flat backward on the ground, abdomen thrust ecstatically up in midair. But when I say hands and feet, think of hands and feet fed through a shredder, and then all the exposed bone and flesh banded back together with black flecked orange shell. This was topped with a great and shiny plates of thorax, a big diamond-shaped thing, and a tiny wasted abdomen. At its highest point sat a huge skull of something that might have been anything, so long as that thing wasn't human. Its lines were obscured by great slabs of pulsing greenish comb-chambered flesh, and here and there someone had slapped on long wicked hairs as thick as your fingers, which weren't that thick. I'm just amending here. Your fingers are fine. Great serrated beetle jaws emerged from either side of the skull's maw, dripping steaming liquid, and it snapped meditatively as it stood. Hung, actually. Transparent wings buoyed it up, moving so rapidly that with what steam and blood and the heat in the dark, I hadn't seen them to start with. And as I watched, little pinpoints spun within the black craters of the skull's eye sockets, and then great wet black eyeballs emerged from those holes. This would have been a terrific moment for you to come back. It would have been completely sweet. I don't care how much of a hot badass I'm meant to be. I was in the wrong body, clutching a sword I'd never used, and you didn't have any muscles, and I absolutely did not feel well. I felt bad. I needed a timeout. But the monster screeched in a weird double-throated bleating chitter. Two sounds simultaneously, and both of them shitty, and those eyeballs swiveled round and round and round. I lined up in your front foot with your back ankle, thumb wrapped low around the hilt of your sword, which proves that you can't put the sword fighter into the necromancer, but you can't... Wait, hang on. And I said, God damn it, I told you to lift weights.
Yay!
It's such a triumphant return for this character.
Yeah, right. I mean, we kind of knew it was going to happen the whole time, but maybe not. And then finally, it's delightful. And
It's just like boom, she's here, and like all that energy that is Gideon just rushes back into the story all at once, and it's great. It's great.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I love that she still has this like tender affection for Harrow, and that actually just like finds its way into the actual narration itself.
I'm just amending here. Your
Yeah.
fingers are fine.
Yeah. I love there's some I just love the way she does this, just the way she writes, where it's like a mix of like sort of fantasy description of this monster, and and then mixed in there it'll be like double-throated bleeding chitter, two sounds simultaneously, and both of them shitty. it's,
Yeah.
it's like the perfect like sort of subversion just constantly. I love it. I love Gideon. I'm so glad she's back. I'm so glad that she's back and she's never going away.
Yep, never, ever, ever, ever.
Yay.
She's gonna stay forever.
All right, shall we move on?
Yeah.
Here we're back in Canaan House in the river, with the ghosts of the necromancers managing to summon a hero from an epic poem, fight their battles for them.
Which is almost, to me, this is funnier than Gideon coming back.
This was like sort of my favorite part in a way.
Yeah.
But all right, let's do it. Ninth was my name, said the new arrival. Ninth was my hearth and my homeland. Here have I come at your calling. None may return from the river unless he be bidden by bloodright. Tell me, why have I been drawn here? And Abigail said, I speak your name, Matthias Nonius, cavalier of the ninth house. I charge you to protect the reverend daughter of Dreaber, and to slay her enemies. Waste not your breath, said the ghost of Matthias Nonius. Such was my task when I lived. Why now in my death would I need a reminder? Harrow said, mostly to herself, Oh God. As the newcomer spoke, he had circled very slightly to the right, away from Harrow. The sleeper had kept her gun trained on him the whole time, cautiously, as though waiting to see what he would do. Now she fired, and Nonius moved. In one long liquid evolution, he seemed to flatten and extend himself. His whole body became a single smooth device for deploying his rapier's blade, like a needle flicking out of a spring housing. The point bit into one orange flank, and the sleeper stumbled backward. From this new tear, Harrow saw dark liquid trickle. Nonius's body folded back into place somehow, his rapier held with the hilt low and the tip pointing up at his opponent's face. He resumed his slow circular drift. A tool for a killer of beasts, he said. What warrior wields such a weapon in honorable service of combat? Has dignity wholly departed the houses since I saw the starlight, or are you some raider or cutthroat? You're just a ghost like the rest of them, said the sleeper, but this time the flat voice that emanated from the hazmask carried a tinge of disbelief. You don't get the special rules. In life I was only a man, the ghost agreed, but the ninth house granted me honor, and made me, unworthy its servant. I speak with the voice of the tomb, and my strength is the strength of the Black Gate. Why am I talking in meter? Oh God, it's so fun.
It's so fun. I mean, like we haven't actually talked much about Ortus throughout the course of the show, but I loved that this is the payoff of him constantly working on like this great artwork of his, which is the epic poem of Matthias Nonius, and then he gets to summon him, and Ortus is so adorable that he doesn't take any credit for it. He's like, it's all Abigail, she did it all. It's like, no man, like this is your fervent love of this guy and your love of poetry created this person. And what's going on in chat right now is the question of, did they really summon the ghost of Matthias Nonius, or did they create this person whole cloth from their devotion? And I like the latter more, actually.
I mean, my feeling was that, this was basically the ghost of Matthias Nonius, but that a ghost is kind of a malleable thing, and by giving him a framework of this legendary hero, it leveled him up in a sense and made him into this great champion. So Matthias Nonius was not really like this
Well,
in
sure.
real life, probably.
That's the why am I talking in meter coming through, like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I like that. Like his soul was plucked but transformed into the epic poem version of his character, which
Yeah.
is just wonderful. Yeah, and I mean, like, to what Doom is saying, like throughout the whole book, Harrow hates his work on the Noniad, right? He
Uh-huh.
hates that he's constantly working on this and constantly quoting it, but she knows the whole thing. She like knows enough to, when he's struggling for the incantation of reading it, like she finishes the sentences, and every time he says a quote from it, she's like, oh, chapter 5, my least favorite of the chapter. It's like she has the whole thing memorized despite absolutely hating it. It's
Uh-huh.
just wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fantastic. I don't know. So one thing we haven't talked about a lot is actually Ortus.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's because Moira Quirk does such a great job with the voice acting for Ortus, but he was basically not a character effectively in the first book, and here
No,
he's
he just
almost my
died.
favorite. What?
He just died. He just
Yeah,
died.
he just died. I mean, he was in there in the beginning for like
Yeah.
2 seconds and he
Yeah.
died. But here he's almost my favorite character in this book because he's actually like he's this big lug of a man who's always sad and mopey and saying self-deprecating things and quoting depressing epic poetry. But then like there's like this layer of just like Harrow.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing that I love every time she does this in the story, which is that he's sort of a gag on the surface. He's sort of a joke. You're meant to laugh at how he's basically like the big lumbering guy in the Addams family or whatever. But then also underneath the surface of that is this guy who his life has been totally ruined by the ninth house, and yet he still has this devotion to the ninth house.
Mm-hmm.
And just like Harrow, actually, like they actually have a ton in common. And I think a lot of their like conflict springs from the fact that they they're so similar, actually.
Yeah.
Um, and I just really love getting to know Ortus, the ghost of Ortus, who is still Ortus.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think he's wonderful. He's almost too pure for this world, like especially for the ninth and how terrible it is.
Hmm.
Um, he's really wonderful. Uh, I I want, like, it is interesting. Like there's a lot going on with the idea that Harrow, because Harrow crafts this, right? She crafts this change to make Ortus the second character in her story on new canon, right?
Hmm.
And to and to you know be the one that she sacrifices to become a lictor. Like,
Hmm.
so she puts Ortus in this role, and that's really interesting too, because that shows, to me at least, on some level, she feels some responsibility for his death as well, and she's trying to struggle to find meaning for his death. And so when she's trying to craft this new version of what happened, that he's the one that stars in this new, like, give him something,
Yeah.
create something, give him
Right.
meaning in some kind of way.
Yeah, at least give him an honorable death of the kind that he would, appreciate from his, um, from his epic poetry, right?
Yeah.
And it's really quite beautiful, actually, because yeah, his death, qua death, was ignoble.
Yeah.
He just got
Yeah.
murdered, and it sucked. But in the afterlife, this is still his sentience, right? He's able to basically, through his devotion to the ninth house, summon a great hero and
Mm-hmm.
save the day. And it's just like, yeah, like she literally was able to give him a noble death, which is just great. And they have this great closure, and folks in chat are talking about how
He hugs her.
he hugs her, and they're able to actually understand each other and connect before he moves on into the river.
Mm-hmm. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
I love it. I love you, Ortus.
me too.
I want to
My
read.
favorite.
I want to read the. Didn't she say she was gonna write an epic poem for him? What did she call it? Like the Ortiad, or like just something.
I don't know. I
I
didn't hear this.
I want to read Ortus the Ninth.
Me too. I want to read Ortus tonight.
All
Give it
right.
up.
So we're getting to the end of the book now, and here we see that the plan of the Lictors is fully revealed. They wanted revenge against their god for his lies regarding how to do the lictorship, and we see here that he is begging mercy for forgiveness. Mercy, he said raggedly, tell me what to do and I'll do it. I'll do anything. I would go to the ends of the universe if you told me that I could suffer enough, withstand enough, learn enough to be truly forgiven. Tell me. Thick tears pooled in those bloody, stormy eyes. Augustine looked at her, and then he quite abruptly pressed his back to the wall and slid down until he was sitting, a posture of absolute defeat. Look at me and tell me you loved Christabel, she said raggedly. Look at me. Look right in my eyes. Tell me that you never wanted any harm to come of her. God took her hands in his own. I loved Christabel, he said. Tell me you never wanted any harm to come to her, she said. I loved Christabel, he said. I never wanted any harm to come to Christabel. I'm so sorry, Mercy, I'm so sorry. She was an absolute storm of tears now. She pressed her face into his chest and gave way, and though as though struck with a rock from behind. He held her close and said, I'm so sorry. I loved you all. I adored you all. I thought I was doing the right thing. She was a crumple of misery. Tell me that you're sorry you lied, you bastard. I lied to you, he said. They're dead because of me. I let them die because I thought that was easier, and I have regretted it for nearly 10,000 years. I love you so much, Mercy. I will love you three until the end of time, until there is nothing left but the remnants of atoms of the God and man who loved you. I forgive you everything, Lord, she whispered, and she slid her hands inside him. The Emperor of the Nine Houses came apart, layer by layer. It was instantaneous, but so simultaneously slow, so unbelievably fucking slow, that it was like we saw every moment, you and I. He flew apart. The body of God separated from every divine part of itself. There was a brief flare of that sinus panicking magic, which fizzled as Mercy Morn somehow disconnected all his wires at once. It was as though he were suddenly 9 million particles of magnet, repelling one another. That necromancer deity in the human frame, wasn't it just, after all, a human frame? Exploded. He split into parts, and then the parts split, and the room drowned in a red mist. The mist became a powder, and the powder dwindled into nothingness, until Mercy Morn was left standing alone, wet with sweat and some other liquid, but clean. What a moment. What a moment.
The end.
So people are asking the question in chat that I was about to ask you. Does he mean this here, or is he just saying what he thinks she needs to hear?
Okay, this is my interpretation of this character, is that he regrets this only because it made his life miserable for 10,000 years, because his lictors have been miserable about their loved ones being dead.
Mm-hmm.
And him being a little bit of a psychopath either can't relate to that or kind of just wishes they would get over it. And they haven't, and they haven't gotten over it for the whole 10,000 years. And he's like, man, this sure has sucked. I kind of wish that I hadn't told them to kill their cavaliers.
Mm-hmm.
But that it's not because he loved their cavaliers, and it's not because he regrets killing their cavaliers because killing is wrong and he wiped out their existences. It's because it made his life harder. That's my interpretation of this character.
Oh, you have such a harsher take on this guy than I do. I'm not saying you're wrong, by the way.
I just want to say, like, he's kind of a Rorschach blot of an abuser.
Yeah.
Where you can project onto him whatever shit you've had to deal with in your life.
That's fair. That's fair.
So yeah, I mean, feel free to disagree because it's a fictional character.
No, I mean, I do think he legitimately regrets it, and I do think he is sorry for it, like legitimately sorry for it. I don't think it changes anything, and I don't think he's going to change his behavior because of it. Like I don't think, like, obviously not, like, the one thing that I'm not clear of is we know that they figured out how to do lictorhoodness without the Cavalier dying, but we don't actually learn how that was done, do we?
Right. No, I mean, we know that he did it. We don't know that anyone else knows how to do it, and we don't know why he wouldn't just tell them.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the crucial thing. And we don't know, like, is that why Electo went mad or whatever is up with her? We don't really know.
Was she a monster before Lictor heard, or was it a result of that method?
Exactly.
Because that feels like a thing to tell them in this moment, you know? It was like,
That was what I was thinking. Like because if he could just say like, yeah, I mean the method keeps them alive, but it turns them into a monster that you have to put down anyway. So like
mhm,
that's not a but he doesn't say that. So it's probably
yeah.
not as simple as that.
Yeah, and to Kyrgyzstan's credit, thanks for reminding me of that, that one of the other Lictor candidates almost figured out how to do it, and so they were eliminated.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's really, this is why I love this guy, because I do like, especially when I read this, just like when I read it out loud, I see sincerity in it. Like I do. I loved you all. I adored you all. I thought I was doing the right thing. I think he believes that earnestly with all his heart. But it doesn't matter, and it's like this idea. This is, first of all, the again, this is inverting Christianity, right? God doesn't ask for forgiveness.
Hmm.
God provides forgiveness. Jesus forgives you. That's like the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
You are this impure, sinful being, and God and Jesus take your sins and forgive you. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how bad it is. Put your faith in God and you will be forgiven. Your slate will be wiped clean. And here is God begging for forgiveness,
Hmm.
begging for mercy from mercy. It's great. It's great stuff. And I think I love that. I even think that when she says I forgive you, she means it.
Hmm.
But like, there's a difference between forgiveness and like you need to be stopped.
Right. Well, the thing is, she's right too, because like he. Okay, so this is why I think I have a case for being as cynical as I'm being, because 5 seconds later he kills her,
Hmm.
right? So like this whole thing where he's like, "Oh, I loved you guys so much. I've always loved you. You're so important to me. The most important thing in the world." And then she tries to kill him, and then he blows her away, and then he's like, "All right, which of the rest of you am I going to need to put down now?
Hmm.
Because like I'm tired of this shit." And like
Yeah.
it's kind of a mask off moment where you realize, like, okay, at least some amount of this, like, oh, you're all so precious to me. You're my children. No, you're not gonna. You'd rather die than kill your children. And clearly, he doesn't value them nearly at that level.
Yeah.
Um,
But also, I mean, he says, I'm not going to like, I'm not going to, like, he says, I will love you until the end of time. Like,
mhm.
which I think he will. I think he will love Mercy for the rest of eternity.
Well,
But that's not going to stop him from killing her.
right. Well, I think that's like the abuser language thing where it's like, I love you. That's why I have to beat you up sometimes to get you in line, because that's how I show. It's like it's he he loves her in a narcissistic way,
Yeah.
where the love doesn't actually require him to do anything uncomfortable for him.
Right. Right. Yeah. Where she'll, like, every so often my children come and confront me with something and I apologize for it, and then hopefully we'll just go back to the way things were.
Right.
Because
The other thing about an apology is like an apology that works and that is believed has to come with a believed implication or explication of I will not do that again, because doing it in the first place was a mistake, and I would never do that again. And in fact, he obviously doesn't believe that, because he literally just had another batch of lictors kill their cavaliers and do the same exact thing.
that's so true.
And he's gonna
Yeah.
keep doing it. And
Hmm.
and and so he's not. He's like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, babe. I mean, it's like like the vibe I get is like, oh, I'm so sorry I cheated, babe. And there's like he's gonna cheat again. He has no intention, Like that's exactly the vibe I'm getting from that
Yeah,
man.
100%. But I do believe in those cases that the individual is legitimately sorry that they cheated,
Well,
and it's not going
they're
to
sorry
stop
they
them
got
from
caught.
doing it. Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, I think you can be sorry that you got caught and also have guilt that you did the act
Uh-huh.
still.
But
Um,
but then also have no plan to not do that again, really.
Correct,
So
correct, and that makes you a bad person.
yeah,
Yeah,
he is. Yes, yes, exactly.
yeah. I think this is also so great, and I don't I don't know where it's going from here. I mean, obviously, what we see is that God does not die here. God gets very close to dying, and then our hero character Ianthe saves him at the last minute, right?
Damn it, Ianthe. Yeah, he pulls a Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
All right.
So I don't know where we go with God from here, but I bet he's angry. But he's a little angry.
I bet he's angry. I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea what's going to happen in the next book. I have like
Mm-mm.
negative idea of what
Well,
the
the
next
funny
book is
thing
going
is,
to be
I
about.
know what the title of the next book is, and I don't know. I'm like,
Right.
who dat? I don't know who
Who's
that
that?
is.
What does
Am
this
I
have to?
supposed to know who that
Are we
is?
just going to meet a whole new cast of characters and it's going to be
Yeah.
10,000 years later? Hope not. All right. Shall I move on to
Yeah.
slide 16, uh, where in the notes Scott has written, what the fuck is going on here? Eager now, she hauled her freezing meat to stand. She passed beneath those pillars as she had as a child, followed the path she still traced in dreams. She was exhausted more than cold, her head filled with the soft, heavy tiredness of too much waking and not enough sleep, of a long day on the job without rest or break. She walked into the mausoleum, and she approached the tomb itself. The chains of the great holes were snapped and broken. The ice crawled up the sides of the empty altar. Within that bed of ice and glass, on the stone-shaped pillow to prop the head, that final resting place of Harrowhark's one true love, lay a sword. It was the two-handed sword that had lain at the bottom of the sleeper's coffin, just as Dias had seen it. Harrowhark had come home, and she was not afraid. She did not know why she did it, but she climbed inside that empty coffin, and she took the sword within her arms. She was filled with a drowsy, comfortable certainty, as though rather than an icy tomb she had been tucked into a bed with a fluffy with a pillow fluffed beneath her. Her eyelids felt as heavy as the chains that lay broken around the outside of the bier. The storage she embraced shamelessly. Those 6 feet of steel held no fear for her now. Something rustled at her side. She had not seen it when she climbed in. It had been tucked to one side of the coffin. When she reached out to hold it in front of her face, she found a shiny mess of magazine flimsy. The crumpled front page showed a woman in a cohort uniform that was so far from official it did not merely strain credulity, but snapped it in two pieces. A white jacket, at least 3 sizes too small, boots, and nothing else. The ice felt kind and warm. The stone gave as though it were cotton. Harrow lay where the body had lain, perfectly at her ease, perfectly comfortable, and she peered blearily at the header. Front-line titties of the fifth, she read, and found she was smiling helplessly to herself. She murmured, Nav, you ass. That's not even a real publication. Then there was a huge sidelong rocking in the manner of an explosion or a cradle. Her eyes closed, lying in the tomb that had claimed her heart, far away in a land she had never traveled. Harrowhark Nonagesimus fell asleep, or dropped dead, or both. I mean, my interpretation of this is that she swapped places with Gideon.
Yeah, I mean that's the magazine is the only thing that gets me to think that she's now in the pocket of wherever in her mind that she stuffed Gideon, right?
Yeah, yeah, because somehow Gideon was. So that's one thing that I was 80% of the way there on. All the other lictors to complete their lictorhood ritual have like okay, I am confused about this. This is the thing I'm confused about officially
Okay.
because I thought that they had like metabolized their cavalier and that like their soul was consumed, but then you realize no, because when Gideon the um the brave whatever his name is
Bold.
bold when Gideon the bold dies, his cavalier takes over the body again. So he's still, but then there's an implication that he's a kind of a, or she actually, I think, I don't remember, but that his cavalier is a kind of exception to the rule. So maybe that's why.
The implication there to me was that he did it a different way, and there's actually many different ways of doing this thing than just the one that
Okay.
they've decided.
Okay, so they're a weird exception, but most of the others they have kind of metabolized, and so
Yes.
so the reason why Harrow hadn't like finished the ritual is that Gideon was still basically totally intact somewhere inside of her, and so
Yes.
my interpretation here is that they just kind of flipped.
Yes. That is correct. That they basically eat the soul of the other person and use their soul as power to power their lictorhood stuff.
Right.
And she did not fully do that, and that's why Gideon's still around. And yeah, I mean, and from an image and metaphor standpoint, the fact that the place that she stored Gideon was within the coffin of the other woman that she loves
Uh-huh.
is just too perfect for words. It's really really good.
Yeah. Can I just say how much I loved the bit where uh, Gideon, the bold, comes in, steals Gideon Nav's sunglasses, which we think at the time is just a gesture that makes very little sense. It turns out it's to hide the eyes, to hide
Mm-hmm.
the fact that this is not in fact Gideon, and then plays out the whole scene. And then the way the voice actor does it gradually drops the voice of that character and replaces it with a totally different voice after
Oh
they get
wow,
away from
that's fun.
God. Yeah, it's very fun. Yeah,
That's fun. Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, the eyes are a thing. We're reading two books right now that center on eyes a lot and the changing in eyes. I want to think more on that, but
Yeah. When they're windows to the soul. That's
well,
it.
yeah. I mean, that's literally it. Yeah. All right, let's talk about the epilogue, Matt. The epilogue.
Yeah.
And then, when it was very late, they'd climb down 30 flights of stairs to street level, picking their way through abandoned sacks of clothes or laminate takeaway boxes, the press of other people smelling like the day-to-day sweat of working in a sultry office, or the day-to-day sweat of being outside in the heat, or the day-to-day sweat of fear. She would be taken to the little corner store with its great barricades of snacks and pills and pamphlets and thin, cheap shirts, and sit on the should-be white chairs and smell the deep fryer going, and then pick over crispy chunks of potato or pan-blasted sweet fruit or sausage meat in batter, with time enough after to lick her burnt and salty fingers. She and the person who looked after her had used to go to a different haunt, where the food was cheaper and the sausages more juicy, but there the man who fried the food had once said warningly, "It's hot," only to find out that she had already stuffed her mouth full of lacy fried things anyway. The man had said, laughing, "Her lips should be burnt off, eh?" But her lips had not been burnt off. It had barely hurt. For some reason, because of that, they no longer patronized that sausage man. Out there in the outskirts, soldiers walked the city with their guns and their riot shields slung over their shoulders, looking grimly cross in the heat under their helmets and great reflective visors. Some nights they heard the pop, pop, pop rattle of a gunfight, and on these nights they would shut the windows and lie with most of their clothes off on the floor of the bathroom. On nights like this, in the dark, her face to press hot cheeks, turning her face to press hot cheeks into the cool ceramic bumps of the tile below, she would look into the face of the person who looked after her. It was a comforting face to look into. It was resolute, keen, utterly unmoved face, which did not flinch at the angry carolin of vehicle hawks, nor at the sound of someone shouting from the rooms close by through the thin walls. It felt as though she had always been fond of the face, and of the dark, sharply bobbed hair, and she loved without reserve the eyes, those great Lambert eyes, the irises so skillfully and gently blend that it seemed that there was no tint or shade in the clear and beautiful gray. And she would say idly, more as a prayer than a demand, "Have you worked out who I am?" "Not yet," said Camilla. Who dat? What is that? Does any of this mean? Serious question.
Are we
Am I
supposed to figure
supposed
this
to?
out?
Am I supposed to glean anything from this?
I mean, probably. I mean, we're probably supposed to have figured all of this out, Scott. But I definitely don't know what's going on here.
Am I supposed to know who Camilla is? Because
So
that is one that feels like I should maybe remember that name.
Camilla is a character from. Okay, so Doom is explaining everything to us. Camilla is a character from the first book who has brown eyes, and so these are Palamedes' eyes. So this must be. I don't know, man. Like this is the thing where I love a good mystery. Like that's why I love Gideon the Ninth. But there's mystery, and then there's just like I don't know. And I'm doing the Vincent Vega doing my arms out to my sides reaction gif right now. I don't know what to do with this. It's a good, I think that's kind of the point of an epilogue sometimes is just to be a little bit of a stinger to get you talking about what's coming next, and it's kind of appropriate actually. But
I guess.
but I feel like this was actually more like anticlimax because the actual ending of the book was really good.
Yeah, I agree. I don't need you to. You sell me on your next book by making a good book. I don't need no cliffhangers in my novels.
Yeah, right. Because we, I mean, we kind of have a cliffhanger. The cliffhanger is okay. So Gideon is in Harrow's body,
Mm-hmm.
and Harrow is in, is locked away, and it's explicitly ambiguous. She either fell asleep or she dropped dead or both.
Mm-hmm.
She's dormant in some way, and it's like, well, is that the end, or are we going to get Harrow back? Are we going to get Gideon and Harrow back? Because you can view this whole saga as a kind of, old-fashioned lovelorn romance where we want these two to be together, but one of them's dead, and currently they're trapped in a situation where they basically have to trade out bodies to decide who gets to be alive. And it's like, well, we have necromancy, we have the god emperor who can resurrect solar systems. Surely the power to just bring them back exists in this universe.
Sure.
And we want to see that, right? So like that to me is the cliffhanger anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think the big things that didn't get answered to me are circling around Johnny Boy and what happened, 10,000 years ago. What's he working towards? Like what's his goal? Like, does he have an end goal, or is it literally just survive at no cost, at any cost?
I don't like the man, so
Well, I mean, he doesn't like you either.
I know.
This is the longest delay ever. Anything else that we didn't talk about that you guys? One of the slides I regretted not pulling is the Harrow Hark makes soup slide, which is great.
Yeah.
And then feeds people
Right.
marrow of herself.
Well, that's great. And then the part where she's been awake for like 97 hours straight and using necromancy to keep herself awake and like losing her mind floridly that's another one of my favorite parts. There's a lot of good parts in this book.
There are. The soup is some of my favorite. Just imagine like God, like the Christian God going, okay, Scott, you like chill, just learn, like do good, yes, like to help charity, grace, but like just chill, like just like learn how to make soup or something.
Yeah. You're kind of a lot, Scott.
And then she goes to Yanthi and is like, hey, God told me to make soup. How do I make soup?
Well, the description of the soup is extremely hilarious too, because it's like basically an extremely watery broth, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Because he just doesn't even understand the concept of like what a soup is supposed to be like in the first place.
Well, because what the Yanthi tells her is like put vegetables, put onions at the bottom, let them burn, then pour in some broth, and then pour in salt, and you'll have made salt soup.
Yeah, it's great.
What did you think of the fan fiction-y sections? The ones where we kind of run through a quick gauntlet of Harrow being different characters in this whole performance. That was fun because it's like she's in her last desperate throes of avoiding the truth, and so she's frantically trying to build a narrative, and every time someone comes in and goes like no.
Yeah, I mean it's fun, right? It's delightful, it's funny, it's some of the levity that I love about her writing style.
I did like the recurring beat of everything around her while in the river constantly being like, this isn't how it goes.
Yeah, because I guess that's her subconscious trying to wake her up or something. I don't know. I'm not actually sure what.
Well, I mean, it could be the other ghosts. Like they're there and being like, "What's going on here?" and trying to be like, "Hey, this isn't right."
Yeah, right. Because they're also sentient. That's true. The river is such a fun concept. We didn't talk about the river explicitly, but like I love the mix. It's sort of like the warp from 40K, where it's like the psychic realm of
Wow. I don't know what that is.
death, but it's also the realm that you use to travel to do magical fast travel.
Yeah, I actually, in my earlier drafts of slides, I had pulled their first travel through the river, and I just couldn't fit it in. And I was like, maybe we can talk about that organically somewhere else. But it's a fun little idea, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Huh.
All right. Everyone's just picking their favorite quotes right now.
Huh. Okay. There's just so much stuff. Doom is just rolling out
Yeah,
all of these
all
deep pulls where I'm
the
like,
little trivia. Yeah.
I kind of know what you're talking about, but I don't. Yeah, it's. I got to reread this at some point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know when I'm gonna do it, but I got to as well.
Yeah. All right, Scott.
Because I'm tired, not because it's midnight and I'm tired.
It is very tired in here right now.
John Stopper, she's using theorems.
Yeah.
There's so many good lines.
That was great because at the moment it was like, no, she can't possibly. Oh my God.
Oh, it's such a fun book. This is what I mean. Like, it's ironic that I did not feel fun when I was reading this book, but like every moment of this conversation, I was like, this is such a fun book. I mean, this is weird. I think this is just gonna be my relationship with this author, where like I always love the book once I finished it, but my process of reading the book is always difficult because I felt a similar way about Gideon, honestly.
Yeah, right. I think that was interesting because I think I just enjoyed Gideon on an actual moment to moment level more than you did, and so that's why I wanted to read this book so much. And then I think I felt closer to your feelings about Gideon on this one. But I still think it's a really well put together little machine.
Yes.
I just wish that it's all well and good to color outside the lines, but sometimes I need my hand held.
Yeah, sure. Here's what I'll say. Like I'm gonna go back to my Ward comparison at the beginning of the book. The episode, which again might not be something that everyone understands, which is okay. It's a web serial that is a sequel to another book that was very popular, and it does very different things emotionally. I respect the hell out of someone saying, I am going to write a story about this incredibly dark, unfun feeling that people have sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
And I respect the hell out of it. And it doesn't always result in something that's very fun to read, but that doesn't make it less good and doesn't make it less important.
Yep. It's funny. We just talked about Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And we talked about the idea of using humor to kind of mediate talking about really dark, heavy shit. And that's something I thought about a whole bunch during this conversation.
Yeah.
Just the idea that, I mean, maybe that's like the advantage of having, like, you almost have to have a character like Gideon to help you get through it.
Yeah. I really didn't realize how much I missed her whole shtick until she was back, and then I was like, "Oh my god, I needed this! I needed this so bad! I'm so happy right now."
Yeah.
All right, so that is it for us. It's time to reveal the winner of next month's book. So it's a bunch of question marks because I couldn't fill this in ahead of time, but. I'm tallying. The results are being tallied. Let me refresh the poll one last time. The results are tallied. The poll is locked. And the winner of next month's reading, Brandon Sanderson, made a little bit of a comeback, but not quite enough.
Not enough.
So our book next month will be Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. So that's the book we will be reading. I will be making a post saying it as much that will be released on Monday, along with the audio of this book. But Flowers for Algernon is the book for next month. That's what we're going to be reading. And you'll probably see the Sanderson book the month after that, because that's just how things work. But
yep. And as people said, the Sanderson book is probably one of the better ones. So.
Yeah, and it's very, very short. So I was sating our Sanderson fandom people. Not committing us to reading a 1,200-page book. So you're welcome, Matt.
Thank you. All right. Good talk, everyone.
Yeah, sorry, I'm reading chat and not hosting a show, which is not good.
This is what happens when y'all get such good discussions
Yeah,
going. I'm doing the
stop
same
being
thing.
interesting.
I'm sure Scott will handle the talking while I just read these interesting comments that are happening.
All right, so that is going to do it for us this month. That was honestly incredible conversation. Thank you all for making me like this book a lot better. Special shout out to Doom, who just had all the data that we needed on all the parts we were confused about, and everyone else, of course. So if you are listening to this after the fact, if you're listening to the audio, we do hope that you join us next month on Friday, March 25th at 9:30 p.m. when we will be meeting again to discuss Flowers for Algernon, a book that, probably not a lot of people have read, but a lot of people know the story of.
Yeah. I look forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, then head on over to our Patreon account at patreon.com/doofmedia and consider donating to support our organization. At any available level, you'll get access to vote for the books we talk about each month, as well as a bunch of other exclusive features. So go check it out.
That's right. And if you have any questions or comments or just want to reach out and say, hey, you can always find us on Twitter at doofmedia or email us at doofmedia@gmail.com or head over to our wonderful tiny little subreddit that's r/doofmedia.
That's right.
All right, folks, we will see you next month. This is when Doom rips off her mask and reveals, I am Tamsin.
Tamsin Muir is her cavalier.
Oh, yeah, of course. It's wait, aren't those Tamsin Muir's eyes?
It's so funny because I kind of forgot about the eye thing, and it never it didn't consciously register to me that Gideon has unusual eyes, because that was totally a thing in the first book. I just forgot about it.
Yeah, I did too. I suck at this is why the visual kind of stuff just bounces off me, and that's my fault. I'm a bad reader in that way, that I never remember visual details of characteristics. So when in the epilogue, when they're describing in great detail this person's face and what their face looks like, I read it and I'm like, oh, am I supposed to be recognizing these face features and these eyes? And I think that yes, I am, but I'm not. Which is unfortunate. I need to become a better reader that way.
Yeah, I could stand to practice that. All right, everybody, this was a long episode.
Yeah, my God. It didn't help that we had a 5-minute break in the middle where we had to fix my shit. Okay, we're going to be done for the day. So thank you, everyone, again, for hanging out. That was a lot of fun. And goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Farewell.